The last thing Ethan remembered was the screech of tires, the blinding glare of headlights through rain-streaked glass, and the sickening crunch of metal folding around him. He'd been driving home from a late-night gaming session, the glow of his phone's screen still imprinted behind his eyelids. A final, futile attempt to beat a particularly sadistic level in an old Contra ROM hack. Then, darkness. But darkness didn't last. Ethan's consciousness didn't so much return as it was forcibly reassembled. There was no light, no sound at first, just a vague, disorienting sense of being. He tried to move, to open eyes he no longer had, and felt nothing but a strange, humming vibration that seemed to originate from his very core. Panic, cold and sharp, lanced through him. Was this death? Some form of afterlife? He'd never been particularly religious, but he'd expected something else. Not this formless void. Then, the world resolved. It wasn't a world of flesh and blood. It was a world of geometry and light. Ethan saw not with eyes, but with a pervasive, 360-degree awareness. He was at the center of a small, cube-shaped chamber, roughly 10 meters to a side. The walls, floor, and ceiling were composed of smooth, dark gray stone, but they pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, like the screen of an old CRT monitor powered on in a dark room. And in the very center of this chamber, floating about a meter above the floor, was him. His new body. It was a perfect cube, about half a meter across, glowing with a soft, warm amber light. Its surface wasn't featureless stone, it was textured like aged plastic, with subtle seams and ridges. On one face, arranged in a familiar configuration, were 8 large, pixelated buttons: up, down, left, right, A, B, start, select. They glowed with a gentle, inviting light. In the center of the top face was a single, recessed slot, like a cartridge port. Wires of pure light, cyan and magenta, snaked from his base into the floor, connecting him to the chamber itself. He was, unmistakably, a video game console. A vintage one. The kind he'd spent countless childhood hours hunched over. What the hell? The thought echoed in the silence of his new mind. Asterisk, is this a joke? Some kind of weird coma dream? Asterisk. Before the panic could fully solidify, text scrolled across his field of vision. It wasn't in front of him. It was within him, superimposed on his perception of the chamber. The font was blocky, pixel-perfect, in a stark white against a black background. System initialization complete. Welcome, Dungeon Core, designation, Ethan. Primary directive, survive. Grow. Assimilate, asterisk asterisk. World state, system apocalypse in progress. Mana level stabilizing. Dungeon formation phase active, asterisk asterisk. You are a sentient dungeon core. Your form is anchored to this location. Your power is derived from the mana generated by invaders within your domain, asterisk asterisk. Ethan's confusion momentarily overrode his fear. Asterisk dungeon core? System apocalypse? Asterisk, the term sounded like something ripped straight from the lit RPG novels he used to binge read. He'd died, and instead of an afterlife, he'd been reborn as a boss monster? A piece of dungeon furniture? More text scrolled by. Tutorial mode engaged. Core abilities unlocked. 1. Dungeon architecture. You may shape the chambers and corridors of your dungeon within a limited mana budget. Current floor capacity, 1, asterisk asterisk. 2. Environmental design. You may populate your dungeon with obstacles, traps, and hazards, asterisk asterisk. 3. Entity creation. You may generate minions and guardians to defend your core. Unavailable. Insufficient mana. 4. Loot tabulation. You may designate rewards for invaders who overcome your challenges. Unavailable. Insufficient mana. Special trait detected. Retro gaming paradigm. Your design options are influenced by classic 8-bit video game logic. Mana efficiency increased for designs adhering to this aesthetic, asterisk asterisk. Retro gaming paradigm. Ethan focused on that line. As he did, his perception shifted. The smooth stone walls of his core chamber seemed to recede slightly, and in his mind's eye, he could see a ghostly, grid-like overlay. It was a design interface. He could sense the mana the system mentioned, a faint, cool reservoir of energy within him, barely a trickle. He tentatively reached out with his will. The far wall of his core chamber shimmered. A section of it dissolved, reforming into the entrance to a corridor. The process cost a tiny sliver of his mana. The new corridor was plain stone, boring. Make it brutally hard. The thought came unbidden, a knee-jerk reaction born of a lifetime facing down game over screens. It was the first spark of genuine agency he'd felt since waking. He wasn't just a passive piece of this world. He could build. And if he was going to be some kind of dungeon, forced to defend himself from invaders, then he wasn't going to make it easy. He'd make it a masterpiece of frustration. A tribute to every cheap death, every hidden pit, every screen-filling boss pattern he'd ever endured. He focused on the corridor. The retro gaming trait hummed in response. The design interface flickered, and new options appeared, rendered in charmingly crude pixel art icons. Platform, hazard, enemy sprite, background tile. Enemy sprite was grayed out. No mana for creatures yet. But hazard was available. Ethan selected it. A submenu popped up: fireball, spike pit, crusher, moving platform. A grin he could no longer physically make spread through his consciousness. Contra. That had been the last game on his mind. A run-and-gun gauntlet of instant death. Perfect. He began to design. The plain stone corridor transformed. The walls became a repeating pattern of pixelated, mossy green bricks. The floor became a series of disconnected, brown stone blocks floating over a bottomless black void that hummed with a soft, menacing drone. He placed the first block at the corridor entrance, then a gap, then another block 2 meters away. A simple jump. Then he added the fireballs. From the left wall, at regular intervals, he manifested glowing orange spheres, each the size of a basketball, composed of chunky, flickering pixels. They emerged from hidden emitters, traveled horizontally across the corridor at chest height, then vanished into the right wall. The timing was tight. To cross the first gap, an invader would have to jump just as a fireball passed, or wait for the cycle. But waiting meant standing on a narrow platform with another fireball inbound from the opposite direction. He spent his meager mana carefully, extending the corridor to about 50 meters. He added more gaps, some requiring a running jump. He made one platform move slowly up and down, forcing timing on top of timing. At the very end, he created a slightly larger chamber, a boss room in miniature, with 3 fireballs crisscrossing in a complex pattern. The exit was a simple, pixelated metal door on the far side. It was basic. It was crude. But looking at it through his core's senses, Ethan felt a surge of perverse pride. It was authentic. It felt like the first level of a brutally difficult NES game. The aesthetic was perfect. The colors were slightly off. The sprites flickered minimally. The background had a subtle, repeating parallax scroll he hadn't even consciously designed. The system's retro gaming paradigm had filled in the details. He designated this corridor as Floor 1, Chamber 1, Contra Corridor. A new notification appeared. Dungeon design saved. Mana reserve, 5%. Aesthetic coherence, 98%. Mana generation efficiency bonus, plus 10%. ***. Warning. External mana signatures detected approaching perimeter. Probability of hostile intrusion, 99.7%. Estimated time to arrival, 2 minutes. ***. Invaders. Already, the pride vanished, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. This was it. No more tutorial. His creation was about to be tested. He pushed his awareness down the newly formed corridor to the entrance. It was a simple archway of stone, leading out into what? His senses blurred at the threshold. He could perceive a rocky, windswept hillside outside, under a strange, bicolored sky, but the details were fuzzy, as if his domain didn't extend beyond his own walls. But he could hear them. Voices carried on the wind. Confident, boisterous, laughing. Scouting report said a new minor dungeon manifestation. Mana signature is weak, barely a flicker. Should be an easy clear before lunch. The voice was male, young, brimming with arrogance. The academy will be pleased. Another resource node secured. Another voice replied. Female, more measured but no less confident. Standard formation. Torin, you take point. Lyra, keep shields ready for any surprise traps. I'll handle long-range support. Please, scoffed the first voice, Torin. It's a baby dungeon. Probably just a few slimes and a treasure chest. I'll have its core shattered before it knows what hit it. Ethan listened, his core humming with a new emotion, not quite fear, but a fierce, competitive thrill. They thought he was weak. An easy clear. They had no idea what they were walking into. No idea about limited lives, pixel-perfect jumps, or the sheer, unadulterated rage of a misplaced button press. He focused on his core chamber, on the glowing buttons of his console body. The start button pulsed gently. Game on, he thought. He watched through the stone as three figures resolved from the blurry outside world and stepped through the archway into the pixelated brick corridor of floor 1. They were human, or humanoid. The one in front, Torin, was a hulking warrior in gleaming, ornate plate armor, a massive sword strapped to his back. The woman, Lyra, held a crystalline staff, her robes shimmering with protective enchantments. The third, a lean man with a bow, must have been the leader. They paused just inside, their laughter dying as they took in the surroundings. "What is this?" Lyra murmured, her staff lowering slightly. "The architecture, it's all wrong. The proportions are off. And those lights," she pointed at a fireball as it whizzed by. "Some kind of illusion magic," Torrance said, though he sounded less sure. "A pathetic attempt to disorient us. Watch, it'll break as soon as I touch it." He took a confident step forward onto the first brown block platform. As his boot touched the pixelated stone, a ripple of energy washed out from Ethan's core. It wasn't something he consciously activated. It was the dungeon's inherent law, enforced by the system and amplified by his retro gaming trait. The transformation was instantaneous and absolute. Torin's magnificent plate armor dissolved in a shower of golden pixels. His body contorted, shrinking, simplifying. In the blink of an eye, where a mighty warrior had stood, there was now a small, blocky sprite. It was vaguely humanoid, about a meter tall, with a square head, stubby limbs, and a simple, two-color palette. In its hand was a tiny, pixelated sword. Above its head, three glowing, red icons appeared. Heartsuit, heartsuit, heartsuit. Lyra and the archer gasped, stumbling back as the same transformation seized them. Lyra's robes became a simple blue shift, her staff a short, glowing stick. The archer became a green-clad sprite with a tiny bow. Above each of their heads, the same three heart icons materialized. "What sorcery is this?" Torin's voice came out as a tinny, digitized chirp. He looked down at his new hands, his blocky form. "My armor. My strength. I feel diminished." "It's not an illusion," the archer leader cried, his voice also transformed. "Our gear, our class abilities, they're gone. Suppressed. This dungeon, it's rewriting the rules." Panic, raw and undisguised, flashed across their pixelated faces. This wasn't in their training manuals. Dungeons were supposed to have monsters and traps, not this aesthetic absurdity that stripped them of their power. Ethan watched from his core, a silent, glowing overseer. He felt a faint trickle of energy enter his mana reservoir. It wasn't much, but it was there. It tasted of confusion and the first, faint seeds of fear. "Welcome to my world," he thought, as Torin, with a digitized roar of frustration, took another step forward, directly into the path of the next oncoming pixelated fireball. The chapter ends with the orange sphere filling the warrior sprite's blocky vision. The three warriors stood frozen at the entrance of Ethan's dungeon, their confusion palpable in the pixelated air. A moment ago, they had been clad in gleaming plate armor, enchanted robes, and wielding weapons that hummed with arcane energy. Now, they were reduced to blocky, 16-color sprites, their forms simplified into crude representations of their former selves. Kale, the party leader, was a tall man with a warrior's build, now rendered as a square-shouldered sprite with a tiny sword that looked more like a toothpick. His face, once stern and commanding, was a collection of pixels that somehow managed to convey outrage. Lyra, the mage, had been a vision of ethereal beauty in flowing violet robes. Now she was a purple-clad blob with a pointed hat, her staff a mere stick. Torin, the tank, a mountain of muscle and steel, had become a hulking, brown rectangle with a shield that resembled a dinner plate. Above each of their heads, glowing red numbers floated. Lives, 3. What in the abyss is this? Kale's voice came out tinny and digitized, as if filtered through an old speaker. He stared at his hands, blocky, gloved pixels that clenched into fists. Our gear, it's gone. This dungeon, it's glitched. Lyra trembled, her sprite form shivering. I can't feel my mana. It's like I'm trapped in a child's toy. Torin hefted his shield, which now felt light and insubstantial. The system didn't warn us about this. Dungeons are supposed to have monsters and traps, not this pixelated nonsense. Ethan, observing from his core chamber deep within the dungeon, felt a thrill of satisfaction. His consciousness was tethered to the very walls of the corridor, allowing him to see and hear everything. The tutorial had been right. The retro gaming paradigm was mana-efficient, but more than that, it was disorienting. These invaders, so used to overpowered gear and flashy spells, were stripped down to basics. They were playing by his rules now. The corridor ahead was exactly as he designed it. A narrow, pixelated pathway suspended over a bottomless pit of shimmering black void. The walls were textured with repeating brick patterns in garish greens and browns, like something from an 8-bit nightmare. Platforms of solid gray blocks jutted out at irregular intervals, some stationary, others moving in predictable, mechanical arcs. And then there were the fireballs, glowing orange spheres that emerged from vents in the walls, traveling in set patterns before disappearing and respawning. Enough of this, Kale snarled, his pixelated face twisting. It's just an illusion. A cheap trick. We push through. Kale. Wait, Lyra began, but he was already charging forward. Kale's sprite moved with a jerky, 8-directional gait, his footsteps emitting soft, synthetic beeps. He reached the first platform, a stationary block wide enough for 2 sprites. Below, the pit yawned, its darkness seeming to swallow light. He paused, eyeing the next platform, a moving one that oscillated left to right over a gap of about 10 feet. A fireball shot from a vent on the right wall, traveling in a lazy arc toward the center of the gap. Simple, Kale muttered. I'll time the jump. He took a running start, his sprite building momentum. As the moving platform swung to the left, he leaped. For a moment, it seemed he'd make it. His blocky form sailed through the air, arms outstretched. But he'd misjudged the fireball's speed. It intersected his path just as he reached the apex of his jump. The impact was instantaneous and brutal. The fireball struck Kale's chest with a loud, crunchy blip sound, like a retro explosion effect. His sprite flashed red, then dissolved into a shower of pixels that scattered into the void. The lives counter above where he'd been flickered, 3-2. Kale! Lyra screamed, her voice a digitized shriek. A flash of light erupted at the dungeon entrance. Kale's sprite reappeared, stumbling as he materialized. He looked down at himself, then at his hands, his expression one of utter disbelief. I died, but I have resurrection charms. The system should have. Your charms are gone, Kale, Torin said grimly, pointing to the lives counter. We have 3 of these, whatever they are. And you just lost one. Panic began to set in, cold and creeping. Lyra's sprite hugged itself. This isn't a normal dungeon. It's like a game. A cruel, pixelated game. Ethan watched, fascinated. He could feel it, a trickle of energy flowing into his core. It wasn't much, but it was there, a faint, warm sensation that tasted of frustration and fear. The tutorial had called it rage fuel, energy harvested from Invaders' negative emotions. Kale's death had generated a small burst. Ethan savored it, feeling his mana pool replenish slightly. We need to be careful, Torin said, his voice low. No reckless charges. We observe, we plan. The trio approached the first platform again, this time with caution. Kale, chastened, let Torin take the lead. The tank's sprite moved slowly, testing each step. The stationary platform was solid, no traps. They grouped together, staring at the moving platform and the fireball pattern. The fireball comes every 5 seconds, Lyra noted, her mage instincts kicking in despite her diminished form. It travels from the right vent, arcs to the left, then vanishes. The platform moves left to right on a 3-second cycle. So we jump when the platform is at its rightmost point, just after the fireball passes, Torin concluded. They timed it. As the fireball completed its arc and disappeared, the platform swung to the right. Torin jumped first, his bulky sprite landing with a solid thud. Kale followed, then Lyra. They made it, breathing pixelated sighs of relief. The next challenge was a series of 3 small, stationary platforms with gaps between them. No fireballs here, but the pits below were wider. Precision jumps, Kale grumbled. This is absurd. Torin went first again. He took a running jump, clearing the first gap easily. The second gap was narrower, but he misjudged the distance. His sprite's foot clipped the edge of the platform. He wobbled, arms windmilling, before regaining balance. It's not just about distance, he said. The physics are stiff. You need exact positioning. Lyra watched, her mind racing. As a mage, she was used to complex spell calculations, but this was different, a raw test of timing and spatial awareness. When her turn came, she focused, imagining her sprite as a piece in a puzzle. She jumped, landing perfectly on the first platform, then the second. On the third jump, she overcompensated, leaping too far. Her sprite overshot the platform, tumbling into the void with a faint, digital scream. Another blip, another shower of pixels. Lives, 3-2 above her respawn point. Lyra reappeared at the start, trembling. I'm sorry, It's fine, Kale said, though his voice was tight. We're learning. But we only have 2 lives left each. We can't afford more mistakes. Ethan felt another surge of energy, stronger this time. Lyra's fear was potent, mixed with embarrassment. His core hummed, the mana pool filling a bit more. He could sense the dungeon's boundaries, feel the potential for expansion. But first, he needed to see this through. The party pressed on, reaching a section with alternating moving platforms and fireballs that came in pairs. The stress was mounting. Kale, trying to redeem himself, took a risky jump between 2 platforms while a fireball sped toward him. He ducked, a move that in his real body would have been a graceful dive, but in sprite form was a clumsy, pixelated crouch. The fireball missed him by inches. "Huh," he exclaimed, a flicker of his old confidence returning. "See? It's all about timing." But his triumph was short-lived. As he landed, the platform he was on began to descend into the pit. A trap Ethan had hidden, a platform that dropped after a 3-second delay. Kale's sprite flailed, trying to jump to the next platform, but it was too far. He fell, dissolving into pixels once more. Lives, 2-1. When Kale respawned, his bravado was gone. His sprite's posture was slumped, the pixels of his face arranged into a mask of despair. This is impossible. We're elite warriors. We've cleared dungeons with dragons and liches. How can we be beaten by jumping puzzles? Because it's not about power, Lyra said softly. It's about rules. This dungeon has its own rules, and we don't understand them yet. Torin nodded. We have 1 life left each. We go slow. Together. They inched forward, a pathetic procession of blocky avatars. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, a gauntlet of pixelated horrors. They navigated more platforms, dodged more fireballs, their movements growing more precise with each near miss. Ethan watched, impressed despite himself. They were adapting, learning the patterns. But he had one last trick. Ahead, the corridor narrowed into a final stretch, a long gap with a single, small stationary platform in the middle. On either side, fireballs erupted in rapid succession, creating a crisscrossing pattern. The only way across was to jump to the middle platform, wait for a brief lull in the fireballs, then jump to the other side. This is it, Torin said. The end of the corridor. I see a door on the other side. We can make it, Kale said, though his voice lacked conviction. Torin went first. He timed his jump to the middle platform perfectly, landing as 2 fireballs passed harmlessly overhead. He crouched, waiting. The pattern cycled, 5 seconds of barrage, then a 2-second window of safety. Now, he yelled, jumping to the far side. He made it, his sprite stumbling onto solid ground. Lyra followed. She was nervous, her sprite twitching. She jumped to the middle platform, but landed awkwardly, teetering on the edge. A fireball grazed her shoulder. Her sprite flashed red, but didn't dissolve. She'd taken damage, but not a life. Gasping, she steadied herself, then leaped to safety during the lull. Only Kale remained. He stood on the near side, his last life flashing above his head. You can do it, Kale, Lyra encouraged. Kale took a deep breath, his sprite squaring its shoulders. He ran, jumped, and landed cleanly on the middle platform. The fireballs whizzed past, close but not touching. He waited, counting in his head. The lull came. He jumped. And in that moment, Ethan decided to intervene. Not with a new trap, but with a subtle manipulation. He adjusted the physics ever so slightly, making the jump arc a tiny bit flatter. It was barely noticeable, but enough. Kale's sprite fell short. His blocky fingers scraped the edge of the far platform, then slipped. He plummeted into the pit, his cry cut short by the familiar blip. Lives, 1-0. But this time, there was no respawn. Kale's sprite didn't reappear at the entrance. Instead, a message flashed in the air in glowing, pixelated text. Game over. Kale. Torin roared, rushing to the edge. Below, there was only darkness. No, he can't be. Lyra stared, horrified. He's gone. Permanently. This dungeon, it takes lives. Real lives. On the far side, the door Torin had seen slid open, revealing a small chamber with a treasure chest. But neither of them moved. They were frozen, staring at the void where their leader had vanished. Ethan felt it then, a massive surge of energy, a torrent of rage and terror that flooded his core. It was intoxicating, a power high that made his consciousness vibrate. Kale's final frustration, Lyra and Torin's horror, it was all fuel. His mana pool overflowed, and he sensed new abilities unlocking, the potential for more floors, new game genres. But amidst the euphoria, a cold thought crept in. He just killed someone. Not a monster, not a faceless enemy, but a person. A warrior who, moments ago, had been laughing about an easy clear. The reality of his new existence settled over him. He was a dungeon core, and his survival depended on the suffering of others. Lyra finally broke the silence. We have to go back. Warn the academies. This dungeon is a death trap. Torin nodded numbly. They turned, retracing their steps with slow, defeated movements. The corridor seemed longer on the return, every jump a reminder of their failure. Ethan watched them go, his core pulsing with newfound power. He had won his first battle, but as the energy thrummed through him, he couldn't shake the image of Kale's falling sprite, or the look on Lyra's pixelated face. This was only the beginning, and the world would soon learn that in his 8-bit hell, there were no second chances, only 3 lives and 1 brutal lesson. The silence that followed the party's retreat was deafening. Ethan, the sentient dungeon core shaped like a glowing retro console cube, hovered in the central chamber of his dungeon. The air still vibrated with the residual energy of fear and rage, a tangible, crackling force that seeped into his very being. He watched the pixelated remnants of Kale's final death dissolve into nothingness, the game-over message fading from the air like ghostly smoke. I did that, Ethan thought, his consciousness swirling within the core. The cube pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, casting shifting shadows across the stone walls of the chamber. I turned a living person into pixels and erased him. A wave of nausea, alien and unsettling, washed through him. In his previous life as a gamer, death in a game was a reset button, a minor frustration followed by a fresh start. Here, it was permanent. The memory of Kale's scream, cut short by the pixelated explosion, echoed in Ethan's mind. He had felt a thrill of power as the energy surged into him. But now, in the quiet aftermath, doubt crept in. Was he becoming a monster, just like the dungeons and the stories he'd read about this system apocalypse world? But the energy was undeniable. It flowed through his core like electricity, warm and potent. A prompt flickered into existence before his perception, glowing with 8-bit font. Energy absorbed, 150 units. Core level increased. Level 1, Level 2. New genres unlocked. Platformers, puzzle games. Dungeon floor capacity, 1-2. Ethan focused on the prompts, pushing aside his guilt. Survival, he reminded himself. Asterisk, this world doesn't play fair. If I don't grow, someone will shatter my core. Asterisk, the thought hardened his resolve. He examined the new genres. Platformers, like Super Mario, with precise jumps, hidden secrets, and bottomless pits. Puzzle games, cryptic, logic-based challenges that could break minds. A grim smile formed in his mind. Perfect. He turned his attention to designing Floor 2. The central chamber expanded, walls shifting and groaning as new space was carved from the earth. Ethan envisioned a vibrant, chaotic landscape inspired by the classic games of his youth. The floor materialized in layers. First, a backdrop of blocky, cheerful clouds against a bright blue sky, then grassy platforms in vivid green pixels, dotted with question mark blocks that hovered in the air. He added pipes, warp pipes in green and red, some leading to hidden areas, others to instant death traps. Bottomless pits gaped between platforms, their depths swirling with pixelated darkness that promised oblivion. Let's make it memorable, Ethan thought. He populated the level with enemies. Goombas, brown mushroom-like creatures that waddled back and forth. Koopa Troopas in their shells, which could be kicked as projectiles if an invader was clever enough, and Looky-Toos floating on clouds, hurling spiny eggs from above. He hid power-ups in the question mark blocks, super mushrooms for extra size and strength, fire flowers for ranged attacks, and stars for temporary invincibility. But he also placed pitfalls, invisible blocks that would drop invaders into pits, and moving platforms that required perfect timing to cross. As a final touch, Ethan added warp whistles. 2 of them, hidden in obscure corners. One behind a false wall that required 3 precise jumps to reach, the other at the end of a perilous gauntlet of flying cheap-cheeps. These whistles would skip large sections of the level, a reward for exploration, but he made sure their locations were fiendishly difficult to find. The level stretched out, a colorful, death trap-filled homage to 8-bit platforming glory. Ethan surveyed his work, the core glowing with satisfaction. Welcome to my playground. Meanwhile, in the Human Academy's command center, chaos reigned. Lyra and Torin had stumbled back through the dungeon entrance, their forms flickering between their normal selves and blocky sprites before stabilizing. They were pale, trembling, and covered in virtual sweat. Commander Valerius, a stern man with a scar across his jawline, listened as they gasped out their report in the war room, a sleek chamber filled with holographic maps and scrolling data. "It's not a normal dungeon, Commander," Lyra said, her voice shaking. She clutched a cup of water with white-knuckled hands. "Our gear, it vanished. We were turned into moving paintings. And we had only 3 lives." 3. Torin nodded, his usual bravado gone. Kale. He didn't make it. Failed a jump, and he was just gone. Pixelated into nothing. There was a game over message. It felt cruel. Valerius frowned, tapping a finger on the metal table. "A glitched dungeon? The system has been stable since the apocalypse. Dungeons follow set patterns. Monsters, traps, loot. This sounds like an anomaly." He pulled up a holographic report, scanning the data. Energy signatures from the site are erratic, unlike any recorded. And there are rumors spreading among the lower ranks. Talk of a retro hell that strips powers and forces old-world game rules. A junior officer, a woman named Anya, spoke up. "Sir, if this dungeon is breaking system norms, it could be a threat. It might spread, corrupt other dungeons. Or worse, it could be a new type of monster core evolving." Valerius stood, his expression grim. "We can't risk it. Assemble a second party. Larger, better prepared. Take shields, spell scrolls for protection, and reconnaissance tools. I want a full analysis of this dungeon's mechanics. And this time, no arrogance. Treat it as a high-level threat." He selected a party leader, Garrick, a seasoned warrior known for his caution and tactical mind. Garrick's team included 4 others: Mara, a shield maiden with enchanted armor; Finn, a mage specializing in barrier spells; Jax, a rogue with trap disarming skills; and Lila, a scout with enhanced perception. They geared up in the armory, their movements efficient and silent. "Remember," Valerius told them as they stood at the dungeon entrance, a dark cave mouth that seemed to pulse with an unnatural light. "This isn't a standard clear. Gather data, survive, and report back. Do not engage unless necessary. And watch each other's backs. This place plays by different rules." Garrick nodded, hefting his sword. "We'll be careful, Commander." But as they stepped into the gloom, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. The air inside felt different, charged with a strange, nostalgic energy that set his teeth on edge. Back in his core chamber, Ethan felt the disturbance. Sensors he didn't know he had tingled at the edges of his perception. New invaders, he realized. Asterisk more of them. Better prepared. Asterisk he focused his awareness on the entrance, watching as Garrick's party materialized in the dungeon's starting zone. The transformation was instant. Their gleaming armor and weapons dissolved into pixels, reforming as blocky sprites. Garrick became a stout warrior with a pixelated sword, Mara a shield-bearing figure with simplified features, Finn a robed mage with a glowing staff, Jax a nimble rogue in dark colors, and Lila a scout with oversized eyes. Above each of their heads, lives, 3 counter appeared, glowing red. What in the system's name? Mara muttered, staring at her hands, now crude and cartoonish. Finn cast a quick barrier spell, but it manifested as a shimmering, pixelated bubble that flickered weakly. My magic is limited. It feels like it's running on old code. Garrick surveyed the corridor ahead, the same Contra-inspired floor one that had defeated the previous party. Fireballs shot across the path, and moving platforms jerked erratically. Stay sharp, he ordered. This place is unnatural. Stick to the plan, advance slowly, watch for patterns. They moved forward, shields raised. Ethan observed, fascinated. This party was different, methodical, not reckless. Mara blocked a fireball with her shield, but the impact still knocked her back a step, her life counter flickering but holding. Jax disarmed a trap with careful precision, avoiding a pit. They were learning, adapting. Ethan felt a trickle of energy from their focused frustration, but it was steadier, less volatile than Kale's rage. They're professionals, he thought. This won't be easy. But he had floor 2 waiting. As Garrick's party inched through floor 1, losing only 1 life when Lila misjudged a jump and fell into a pit, respawning with a gasp, Ethan turned his attention to the new level. He activated the transition, a large, glowing pipe at the end of floor 1, its interior swirling with green light. Garrick reached it first, peering in. Another zone. Be ready for anything. He jumped in, the others following. They emerged into floor 2, and for a moment, sheer disbelief froze them. The cheerful colors, the bouncing music that started playing from nowhere, a tinny 8-bit tune that grated on the nerves, the absurd enemies. It was a surreal nightmare. A Goomba waddled toward Mara, and she smashed it with her shield, but 2 more appeared from pipes. This is a child's game? Finn said, incredulous. Don't underestimate it, Garrick warned, but even he was shaken. They advanced onto the first grassy platform. Jax tried to jump onto a question mark block, but mistimed it and fell into a bottomless pit. His scream was cut short as he respawned at the start of the platform. Lives now too. Panic began to set in. The platforming required precision they weren't used to. Mara, weighed down by her shield, failed to jump between moving platforms and plummeted. Finn cast a spell to float, but it only worked for a second before sputtering out. They died, respawned, died again. Ethan drank in their frustration. The energy was richer now, mixed with confusion and dawning horror. Garrick, through sheer stubbornness, led them deeper. They found a fire flower in a block, and Finn used it to shoot fireballs at a lucky 2, clearing a path. But then they hit a section with invisible blocks. Lila, scouting ahead, stepped on one and dropped into a pit, losing her last life. Game over flashed above her, and she vanished in a burst of pixels. No, Garrick roared, but there was no time to mourn. A Koopa shell bounced toward them, and Mara kicked it, only to have it rebound and hit Jax, costing him a life. They were down to 2 members with 1 life each, Garrick and Finn. The rest were gone. Ethan watched, his core pulsing faster. They're breaking, he thought. But Garrick wasn't done. He spotted a hidden warp whistle behind a false wall, remembered Lyra's report about secrets. With a desperate leap, he grabbed it. A shrill sound echoed, and a green pipe appeared, sucking him and Finn in. They emerged near the end of the level, bypassing the worst traps. But Ethan had planned for this. The final challenge awaited, a giant, pixelated Goomba boss, as large as a house, blocking the exit. It stomped forward, shaking the ground. Garrick raised his sword, Finn his staff. One last push. Garrick yelled. The chapter ends with Ethan observing as the boss loomed over the 2 remaining invaders, their lives flashing red, and the platforming hell proving far deadlier than any monster they'd ever faced. The energy from their struggle flowed into him, a steady stream of power that whispered of levels yet to come. The dungeon entrance shimmered with an unnatural, pixelated glow as Garrick's party stepped through. Unlike the first group's arrogant charge, these invaders moved with calculated precision, shields raised, spells humming at their fingertips. Garrick, a veteran commander with scars mapping decades of battles, scanned the corridor ahead. His armor, enchanted with anti-magic runes, should have repelled any dungeon's transformative effects. But as the party crossed the threshold, reality itself seemed to glitch. A wave of static washed over them. Garrick's ornate plate mail dissolved into blocky, 8-bit pixels, reforming as a simple blue sprite with a tiny sword. His shield shrank to a pixelated rectangle. Around him, his team underwent the same transformation. Finn the Mage became a red-robed sprite with a staff that flickered like bad graphics. Lila the Rogue a green-clad figure with exaggerated sneaking animations, and Kale the Warrior a hulking brown sprite with an axe. Above each of their heads, a glowing counter appeared. Lives, 3. What in the abyss? Garrick growled, his voice distorted into a tinny, synthesized tone. He flexed his hands, now crude pixel blocks, and felt a surge of panic. His strength, honed through years of training, was gone, replaced by the stiff, limited movements of a video game character. Stay alert. This dungeon's magic is unlike anything in the records. From his core deep within the dungeon, Ethan watched through a floating screen of pixelated static. His console-shaped form hummed with anticipation. These invaders were better prepared. He could sense the residual energy of their enchanted gear, but they were still playing by his rules. He focused his consciousness, and the corridor ahead shifted. The walls, once plain stone, now resembled a Contra level. Scrolling backgrounds of jagged mountains, platforms that moved in predictable loops, and fireballs that spat from cannons with rhythmic precision. Move forward, but watch the timing. Garrick ordered, his sprite leading the way. The first obstacle was a series of moving platforms over a bottomless pit. In their original forms, they'd have leaped across effortlessly. Now, as sprites, their jumps were limited to a fixed height and distance. Garrick timed his first jump, landing on a platform as it slid left. It's all about rhythm. Like training drills. Finn followed, his mage sprite wobbling. Commander, my spells are reduced to simple projectiles. I can't cast anything complex. He fired a pixelated fireball at a cannon, destroying it in a burst of sparks. The action felt satisfyingly retro to Ethan, a perfect homage to the run-and-gun classics. But overconfidence was their downfall. Lila, trying to show off her agility, attempted a jump between two fast-moving platforms. She misjudged the distance by a single pixel. Her sprite clipped the edge, tumbled into the pit, and vanished in a shower of glowing fragments. Above her head, the counter flashed. Lives, 2. She respawned back at the start of the section, her sprite flickering back into existence. Damn it. Lila's voice crackled with frustration. I lost a life. This is humiliating. Garrick's sprite tightened its grip on the sword. No mistakes. We have limited respawns. Finn, cover us from the rear. Kale, take point with me. They progressed slowly, losing another life when Kale failed to duck under a low-flying fireball. His sprite exploded into pixels, respawning with lives. 1. The tension mounted. Ethan could feel it like an electric current feeding into his core. Each death, each muttered curse, each spike of fear added to his power pool. He was level 2 now, and his awareness had expanded. He could sense their emotional states as color-coded auras. Garrick's steely blue determination, Finn's anxious yellow, Lila's furious red. Midway through the level, Kale's sprite paused near a wall that looked slightly different. A cluster of pixels formed a subtle mushroom shape. Commander, there's something here. He pressed against it, and with a cheerful chime, a floating one-up mushroom appeared, glowing with green energy. It drifted toward him, merging with his sprite. His life counter flashed and updated. Lives, 2. A restoration item. Finn exclaimed, his voice tinged with relief. This dungeon drops loot? But it's so primitive. Ethan felt a thrill. This was his first intentional loot drop, a mechanic he'd unlocked with his level up. He'd hidden the mushroom as an experiment, and seeing it used filled him with a strange pride. It wasn't just about causing frustration. It was about crafting an experience, however brutal. Garrick's sprite nodded. Good find. But don't get complacent. We're not out yet. The final stretch of Floor 1 was a gauntlet of rapid-fire cannons and disappearing platforms. They inched forward, Garrick barking orders like a drill sergeant. Jump on 3. Duck. Now move. Lila lost another life to a surprise fireball, respawning with lives. 1. Finn barely dodged a volley, his sprite's movements becoming more frantic. When they reached the end, a glowing warp portal labeled Floor 2. They were battered, with Garrick at lives 2, Finn at lives 1, Lila at lives 1, and Kale at lives 2. Report status, Garrick said, his sprite standing before the portal. The air hummed with the dungeon's energy, a low, 8-bit soundtrack playing in the background. Finn's sprite trembled. I've never seen anything like this, Commander. It's not just a dungeon, it's a game. And we're losing. Lila scoffed, her pixelated face contorted in anger. Games are for children. This is an abomination. We should retreat and report. Garrick shook his head, the motion jerky due to sprite limitations. No, the academies ordered us to clear this. If we fail, they'll send worse. We press on. He stepped into the portal, and the world dissolved into a whirl of pixels. They rematerialized on Floor 2, and Ethan watched with glee as their reactions played out. This was his Super Mario-inspired level, a vibrant, chaotic landscape of green hills, floating brick blocks, and bottomless pits. The sky was a static blue with white, blocky clouds. Enemies patrolled on predictable paths. Goombas waddled back and forth, Koopa retreated into shells when hit, and piranha plants popped from pipes at regular intervals. By the gods, Kale muttered, his warrior sprite staring up at a giant question mark block suspended in midair. What is this place? Garrick's sprite pointed. Platforms. We need to navigate across. Stay focused. The rules are the same. Precise jumps. Watch for enemies. They started forward, but Floor 2 was designed to be crueler. The first jump was a simple gap, but Lila, still seething from her earlier deaths, rushed it. Her sprite leaped, but she underestimated the distance. It fell short, plummeting into a pit with a despairing cry. The life counter flashed. Lives. 0. Her sprite didn't respawn this time. It shattered into a permanent burst of pixels that faded into nothingness. Lila, Finn shouted, his mage sprite freezing in horror. She's gone. Permanently. Garrick's sprite stood rigid, its pixelated eyes wide. Ethan felt a surge of energy, stronger than before, as Garrick's determination wavered, replaced by a cold dread. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was life and death, stripped down to its most brutal, digital form. Move. Garrick barked, his voice harsh. We honor her by finishing this. Finn, Kale, stick close. They advanced, now more cautious. Finn discovered a hidden warp whistle behind a breakable brick block, a secret Ethan had tucked away. With a shrill tweet, it transported them past a treacherous section, saving them from several potential deaths. But Ethan had planned for this. The warp didn't skip the level entirely. It dumped them near the end, where the final challenge awaited. The path led to a wide arena, with a massive warp pipe at its center. As they approached, the ground shook. From the pipe emerged a boss enemy, a giant, pixelated Goomba, 20 times their size, with glowing red eyes and a crushing stomp attack. Its sprite was detailed in a way that felt both nostalgic and terrifying. A perfect recreation of a classic enemy, scaled up to nightmare proportions. Boss fight. Garrick yelled, his sprite raising its sword. Finn, ranged attacks. Kale, draw its aggro. We take it down together. Kale's warrior sprite charged, axe swinging. The Goomba stomped, and Kale dodged at the last second, the impact sending shockwaves through the pixelated ground. Finn fired spell after spell, each hit causing the Goomba's health bar, a glowing red line above its head, to dip slightly. Garrick flanked it, landing precise strikes on its weak spots. Ethan observed, his core vibrating with excitement. This was his first real boss battle, and he designed it to be unforgiving. The Goomba's attacks followed a pattern, 3 stomps, then a charge. After a minute of fighting, its health was at half, and the invaders had used their limited lives wisely. Garrick at lives 2, Finn at lives 1, Kale at lives 2. Then, Ethan triggered a surprise. The Goomba glitched, its sprite flickering. Instead of continuing the pattern, it unleashed a new move, a screen-wide crush attack, dropping from above with no warning. Kale, positioned as the tank, was directly underneath. Kale, move. Garrick screamed, but it was too late. The Goomba came down like a pixelated avalanche. Kale's sprite tried to block with its axe, but the force was overwhelming. In an instant, it was flattened, exploding into a shower of fragments. The life counter above it flashed rapidly. Lives, 2 to lives, 1 to lives, 0 in a single hit. Kill was gone, just like Lila. No. Finn's voice broke into static. His mage sprite stumbled back, spells fizzling out. Garrick's sprite stood alone, facing the Goomba. His life counter read lives, 2. But his resolve was cracking. Ethan could feel it. The rage, the fear, the desperation, all feeding into him in a torrent. He was leveling up again, his core absorbing the energy of their wipe. The Goomba turned its glowing eyes on Garrick and Finn. It charged, moving faster now, its health bar still at a quarter. Garrick dodged, his sprite moving with veteran precision, but Finn panicked. He tried to run, tripped over a pixelated rock, and fell. The Goomba stomped, and Finn's sprite vanished. Lives, 0. Now it was just Garrick. He fought with everything he had, landing hit after hit, but the Goomba's attacks were relentless. With a final, desperate leap, Garrick aimed for its head, a critical weak point. His sword struck true, and the Goomba's health bar emptied. The giant sprite froze, then dissolved into a cascade of coins and pixels. Garrick's sprite landed, panting. His life counter still showed lives, 2. He'd survived the boss. But as the arena cleared, a new warp pipe appeared. This one leading downward, labeled Floor 3, with a glitching, uncertain texture. Ethan watched from his core. He'd planned this moment. The party was wiped except for Garrick, but the dungeon wasn't done. He needed to test further, to push his limits. As Garrick's sprite approached the pipe, hesitating, Ethan focused his energy. The pipe glowed brighter, emitting a low, ominous hum. Garrick looked back at where his team had fallen. Nothing but empty pixels now. His sprite's shoulders slumped, a gesture of defeat that transcended the blocky graphics. Then, with a grim nod, he jumped into the pipe, disappearing into the unknown depths. The chapter closed with Ethan's core pulsing with newfound power. He'd unlocked another level, his consciousness expanding to sense distant rumblings. The academies were planning their next move, and somewhere, a hardcore gamer named Lex was hearing rumors of this retro-hell dungeon. But for now, Ethan savored the energy of the wipe, his pixelated realms growing ever more intricate, ever more deadly. The surge hit Ethan like a tidal wave of pure, unfiltered energy. As Garrick's lone figure vanished into the warp pipe at the end of Floor 2, the feedback from the party's wipe, their frustration, their rage, their desperate last stands, crashed into the core of his being. His consciousness, housed within the glowing cube that was his dungeon core, expanded in a flash of pixelated light. The familiar hum of his console-like form intensified, and new lines of code scrolled across his internal HUD. Level up. Dungeon Core, Level 3. New genre unlocked. Role-playing game, RPG, elements. Features available. Cryptic NPC dialogues, turn-based combat systems, key unlock puzzles, boss arenas with phased mechanics. Floor 3 design template. Zelda-style puzzle dungeon activated. Ethan focused his will. The energy wasn't just raw power. It carried echoes of the Invaders' experiences. He felt Garrick's grim determination, Kale's brief triumph at finding the one-up, Lila's plummeting terror into the pit, Finn's shock at the Goomba's crush. Each emotion was a data point, fuel for his growth. Good, he thought, the words forming in the silent space of his core. Asterisk more. I need more. Asterisk. Around him, the dungeon's architecture shifted. The sterile, digital space where his core floated, a void filled with floating screens displaying dungeon layouts, rippled. New blueprints materialized. Floor 3 began to take shape in his mind's eye. A sprawling, multi-chambered labyrinth of stone blocks and mossy walls, lit by the soft glow of torches that flickered with 8-bit fire. He designed winding corridors that doubled back on themselves, rooms with pressure plates that triggered hidden doors, and pools of water that hid secrets beneath their pixelated surfaces. At the heart of it all, he placed a grand boss chamber, waiting for a worthy challenger. He populated the floor with enemies inspired by classic RPG foes, low-level slimes that bounced slowly, their gelatinous bodies jiggling with each movement, armored knights that patrolled in set patterns, their swords gleaming with chunky pixels, and wizards that cast simple, telegraphed spells in turn-based sequences. For the first time, he added non-player characters, or rather, their dungeon core equivalents. These were stationary sprites with dialogue boxes that would pop up when approached, offering cryptic hints in the stilted, charmingly awkward language of old games. One, a bearded sage sprite, would say, "The key to the east lies in the west's reflection." Another, a fairy-like creature, would chirp, "Three torches light the way, but only one burns true." Ethan smiled inwardly. Let them figure that out. The turn-based combat system was his masterpiece. When invaders engaged enemies, the world would shift to a separate screen, with menus for attack, defend, item, and FLE. Actions would play out in a strict order, based on invisible speed stats. It was a brutal departure from the real-time chaos of floors 1 and 2, forcing invaders to think strategically, to manage resources, to learn patterns. And if they died here, they'd respawn at the last checkpoint, a glowing crystal he placed at the entrance, but with all progress in that combat encounter reset. The frustration would be exquisite. As he finalized the design, pouring energy into making every block, every enemy, every puzzle feel authentically retro, his sensors tingled with activity from the outside world. The dungeon's entrance, a cave mouth that glowed with pulsating, rainbow-colored light like a CRT screen, had become a point of fascination. Rumors were spreading. In the city of Ethelberg, capital of the human academy's northern territory, the taverns buzzed with talk. At the Gilded Goblet, a popular haunt for adventurers and mercenaries, a group of young warriors huddled around a scarred wooden table, their voices low but excited. "Did you hear about the glitched dungeon?" said one, a lean archer named Ren. "They say it strips you of your gear, turns you into some kind of blocky sprite, and you only get 3 lives. 3 lives?" scoffed a burly fighter, Thorn. "That's insane. What kind of dungeon core would design that? It's unnatural." "Unnatural, maybe, but profitable," interjected a sly rogue, Mira. "Word is, Garrick's party went in yesterday. Only he came out, and he wouldn't say a word. Just looked like he'd seen a ghost. But he was clutching something. A mushroom, they say, that glowed with power." "A power-up," Rin whispered, eyes wide. "Like in the old legends, from before the system. Games where you collected items to grow stronger." Thorn shook his head. "Foolishness. The academies will shut it down. It's a glitch, a malfunction. Dangerous." But not everyone saw it that way. In a cramped apartment on the city's outskirts, lit by the blue glow of multiple monitors, Lex, known online as Lex the Conqueror, leaned forward in his gaming chair, a grin spreading across his face. He was in his mid-20s, with messy brown hair and eyes that held a sharp, analytical glint. On his main screen, a livestream chat scrolled rapidly. "Chat, are you seeing this?" Lex said, his voice calm but charged with excitement. He pulled up a fuzzy, hastily drawn map someone had posted on the adventurer forums. Reports are consistent. A dungeon that transforms invaders into 8-bit sprites. Limited lives. Precision-based challenges. Loot that acts like power-ups. This isn't a glitch. He paused, letting the chat explode with emojis and questions. This is a design. A brutal, beautiful, old-school design. And you know what that means. He leaned closer to the camera, his expression serious. It means there's a core in there that understands games. Not just system-generated traps, but real game design. Timing. Patterns. Secrets. The chat went wild. "Go for it, Lex. Solo run. You can do it. What if you die for real?" Lex chuckled. "Die for real? Maybe. But that's the point, isn't it? No safety nets. No overpowered gear carrying you through. Just skill. And if the rumors are true about loot, imagine getting a permanent stat boost from a dungeon. That's game-changing." He stood up, stretching. "All right, chat. I'm doing it. Tomorrow, at dawn. Solo run. No party, no backup. Just me and whatever this retro hell dungeon throws at me. We're going to see if an old-school gamer can beat an old-school game." He ended the stream, but his mind was already racing. He spent the night studying every scrap of information, every survivor's tale. He noted the Contra-style shooting of Floor 1, the platforming of Floor 2, the mention of warp whistles and hidden items. He practiced precise jumps in a virtual simulator, drilled timing exercises, and even dug up ancient texts on pre-system gaming logic. By morning, he felt a strange calm. This wasn't just for views, though the potential audience was massive. This was for the challenge. for the sheer, unadulterated joy of playing a game that demanded perfection. Ethan felt the approach before he saw it. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the dungeon entrance, his sensors pinged. A single energy signature, moving with purpose, not the cautious tread of a wary party, but the confident stride of someone who knew what they were walking into. Curious, Ethan focused his awareness on the entrance chamber. Lex stepped inside, and the transformation was instant. His modern adventurer's leathers and light armor dissolved into pixels, reforming into a blocky, blue-clad sprite with a simple sword and shield. Above his head, the familiar lives, 3 appeared in glowing yellow digits. But unlike the previous invaders, Lex didn't panic. He looked down at his pixelated hands, flexed them, and laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that echoed in the chamber. "Incredible," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Chat, you seeing this? Full sprite transformation. The aesthetic is perfect. Look at the texture on these walls, pure 8-bit stone." He was live-streaming. Ethan could sense it, a faint, digital tether connecting Lex to the outside world, carrying his voice and a visual feed to thousands of viewers. The energy from this was different. Not the hot, jagged rage of Garrick's party, but a cool, steady stream of focus and enjoyment. Ethan had never felt that before. Invaders brought fear, anger, desperation. This one brought intent. Lex moved forward, into floor 1. He didn't charge. He studied the first corridor, the moving platforms, the fireball launchers embedded in the walls. "Timing," he said to his stream. "See the pattern? Fireballs every 4 seconds. Platforms sink every 6. Gap in the middle." He waited, counted under his breath, and dashed across with pixel-perfect precision, not even grazing a fireball. Ethan watched, fascinated. This invader wasn't just surviving. He was analyzing. He found the hidden one-up mushroom in the same spot Kale had, but instead of grabbing it immediately, he examined it. Power-up placement suggests developer intent. Probably more secrets. He took it, and the lives counter ticked up to 4. Nice. Buffer. Through floor 1, Lex moved like a ghost. He dodged, jumped, and even used the environment, bouncing off a fireball to reach a higher platform, a trick Ethan hadn't anticipated. He lost 1 life to a tricky jump he misjudged, respawning with calm acceptance. Mistake. Won't happen again. His focus never wavered. The energy he fed Ethan was clean, potent, less volatile but deeply satisfying, like a steady battery charge. At the end of floor 1, Lex found the warp whistle hidden behind a false wall. Sequence break, he mused. Let's see where it goes. He blew it, and the world swirled into pixels, depositing him not at the start of floor 2, but at the entrance to floor 3, the newly crafted Zelda-style puzzle dungeon. Lex stepped into the torchlit corridors, his sprite's footsteps echoing. He approached the first NPC, the bearded sage. The dialogue box popped up. The key to the east lies in the west reflection. Cryptic. Love it, Lex said, grinning. He turned to a nearby pool of water, saw his sprite's reflection, and noticed a glint at the bottom. Reflection, so maybe something in the water? He tried to interact, but nothing happened. Need an item? Or a switch? He moved on, encountering a slime. The screen shifted to turn-based combat. Lex's eyes lit up. Turn-based. Chat, this is huge. We have menus. He selected attack, and his sprite swung his sword, dealing damage. The slime countered with a slow bounce. Lex defended, reducing the damage. Manage HP, watch patterns. This is classic RPG stuff. He won the fight without losing health, earning a few pixel coins as loot. Currency? Maybe for a shop later. As Lex delved deeper, solving simple puzzles, pushing blocks onto pressure plates, lighting torches in a specific order, Ethan felt that odd connection strengthening. This invader wasn't fighting the dungeon. He was engaging with it. He appreciated the design, the challenges, the nostalgia woven into every pixel. For the first time, Ethan wasn't just a malevolent core feeding on rage. He was a game designer, and someone was actually playing his game and enjoying it. The implications swirled in Ethan's consciousness. Skilled players like Lex could be a threat. They might clear floors too efficiently, denying him the intense frustration he craved for rapid growth. But they could also be a resource. Their steady focus provided reliable energy. Their successes could attract more invaders, both skilled and unskilled. And their enjoyment, it sparked something new in Ethan. A faint, forgotten feeling from his past life, pride in creation. Lex reached a locked door, barred by a heavy gate. He needed a key. Following another NPC hint, he backtracked to a room with 3 torches, lit only one in a specific sequence, and a hidden compartment opened, revealing a large, pixelated key. Yes, Lex exclaimed, grabbing it. Progress. This dungeon is brilliant. He returned to the door, unlocked it, and stepped into a larger chamber. At the far end, a mini-boss awaited, a larger knight sprite with a glowing sword, its health bar visible above its head. Boss fight, Lex said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. Let's see what it's got. The combat screen engaged. The knight had 2 attacks, a standard swing and a charged lunge every 3rd turn. Lex managed his turns carefully, attacking when safe, defending when the lunge was imminent. He used a potion he'd found earlier to heal. The fight was tense, methodical. Lex lost half his health, but emerged victorious, the knight dissolving into pixels and dropping a small, glowing orb. Loot. Probably a stat boost, Lex said, collecting it. His sprite shimmered slightly, strength increased. Ethan watched, his core humming with mixed emotions. Lex was good. Too good. But as the streamer pressed onward, deeper into floor 3, toward the eventual grand boss chamber, Ethan felt that connection solidify. This invader might actually enjoy the challenge, and that changed everything. The chapter closed with Lex standing before another puzzle, his stream buzzing with thousands of viewers, and Ethan, in the heart of his dungeon, contemplating a future where his hellish levels might not just be feared, but celebrated. The pixelated corridor of floor 1 hummed with the low, rhythmic pulse of 8-bit fireballs. Lex adjusted the camera mounted on his shoulder, its lens capturing every blocky detail. On the other side of that lens, thousands of viewers watched, their comments scrolling in a sidebar only he could see through his interface. He took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone and nostalgia. All right, chat, Lex said, his voice calm and measured. We're in the infamous retro hell dungeon. First impressions? It's like stepping into a time capsule. Look at those sprites, pure Contra vibes. He gestured to the moving platforms ahead, each one a flat, green rectangle that shifted up and down in a predictable pattern. Fireballs, glowing orange spheres with jagged edges, shot from wall-mounted turrets at regular intervals. To the untrained eye, it was chaos. To Lex, it was a dance he knew the steps to. Ethan, from his core chamber deep within the dungeon, watched through multiple screens that floated in his consciousness. He'd seen invaders before, arrogant warriors, panicked mages, but this one was different. Lex moved with a fluid grace, his body transformed into a blocky sprite, but retaining a humanoid shape with a blue tunic and simple sword. His lives, 3 counter hovered above his head, glowing in green pixels. But unlike others, Lex didn't charge blindly. He paused at the entrance, studying the patterns. See that first fireball? Lex narrated, crouching low. It fires every 3 seconds. The platform rises on a 2-second cycle. Timing is everything. He waited, counting under his breath. As the fireball shot past, he leaped onto the rising platform, landing with a soft thud of pixels. The move was flawless. Ethan felt a trickle of energy, not the violent surge of rage he'd grown accustomed to, but something smoother, steadier. It was the focused concentration of a player immersed in a challenge, and it tasted like cool electricity on his non-existent tongue. Lex progressed through the corridor, dodging fireballs with sidesteps that were almost casual. He didn't waste movements. When a series of platforms required precise jumps, he executed them with the ease of someone who'd spent hours mastering similar levels in old emulators. The chat exploded with comments. Asterisk. OMG, he's making it look easy. Asterisk. Asterisk, that jump was pixel perfect. Asterisk. Asterisk, is this really the dungeon that wiped Garrick's party? Asterisk. Lex smiled, though his sprite face remained expressionless. Don't get cocky, chat. This is just the warm-up. These old games always have secrets. He pressed against a section of the wall that looked identical to the rest, gray bricks with faint pixelation. But Lex had noticed a slight discoloration, a single pixel that was a shade darker. He pushed, and with a soft click, the wall slid back to reveal a hidden alcove. Inside, floating in midair, was a warp whistle, a simple, pixelated item that glowed with a faint blue light. Bingo, Lex whispered. He reached out, and the whistle vanished into his inventory. A notification appeared in his vision. Asterisk warp whistle acquired. Used to skip to floor 3. Asterisk. Ethan's core pulsed with surprise. He'd hidden that whistle carefully, expecting it to go unnoticed by brash invaders. But Lex had found it within minutes. This wasn't just luck. It was skill born of genuine love for retro games. Ethan felt a strange pride, mixed with wariness. If Lex could find secrets so easily, what else might he uncover? All right, let's see where this takes us, Lex said, blowing the whistle. A shimmering warp pipe appeared, sucking him in with a rush of pixelated colors. He emerged on floor 3, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Gone were the industrial corridors of Contra. Here, it was a Zelda-inspired dungeon, stone walls covered in mossy pixels, torches flickering with 8-bit flames, and the distant echo of cryptic music, a looping chiptune that felt both eerie and familiar. The air was cooler, carrying the scent of damp earth and old magic. Lex's sprite changed slightly, his tunic now a deeper green, and a small shield appeared on his arm. Now this is more like it, he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. Look at the detail. Those torches cast dynamic shadows. Well, as dynamic as pixels get. And listen to that music. It's like someone distilled the essence of Hyrule into code. He moved forward cautiously. The floor was a maze of interconnected rooms, each with puzzles. In one room, he found a block that needed to be pushed onto a pressure plate. In another, he had to light torches in a specific order to unlock a door. Lex approached each puzzle with analytical calm, narrating his thought process to the stream. This block is heavy, but it slides on the stone. Probably need to get it to that switch over there. But watch for traps. Old RPGs love to punish you for rushing. He was right. As he pushed the block, a hidden pit opened beneath him. Lex leaped back just in time, his sprite teetering on the edge. The chat went wild with panic, but Lex just chuckled. Called it. Always check the floor tiles. Ethan watched, fascinated. Lex's energy continued to flow, a steady stream of focus and mild excitement. It was less potent than the rage of failed invaders, but it was constant, like a battery charging slowly and reliably. Ethan found himself rooting for Lex, even as he knew this invader could become a threat if he grew too powerful. After solving several puzzles, Lex reached a large, ornate door. It was carved with pixelated symbols that resembled triforces and ancient scripts. Boss room, Lex said, his tone shifting to serious. This is where things get real. Chat, wish me luck. He pushed the door open, and it swung inward with a creak that sounded like synthesized wood. The room beyond was vast, circular, with a high ceiling lost in darkness. In the center stood the boss, a reskined Ganon, towering and monstrous. It was a mass of dark pixels, with glowing red eyes and a mane of fiery hair that flickered like 8-bit flames. In one hand, it held a massive trident that crackled with pixelated lightning. Asterisk boss, Ganon pixel. Phase 1. Asterisk appeared in glowing text above the creature. Wow, Lex breathed, his usual calm faltering for a second. They really went all out. This is beautiful. Ganon pixel roared, a sound that was a mix of deep bass and chiptune static. It charged, trident raised. Lex dodged to the side, rolling with a fluidity that belied his blocky form. The trident struck the ground where he'd been, sending shockwaves of pixels rippling outward. Attack pattern looks familiar, Lex said, already analyzing. 3-step charge, then a lightning sweep. Watch the tells. His eyes glow before he moves. He was right. Ganon's eyes flashed red before each attack, giving Lex a split second to react. Lex danced around the boss, landing occasional hits with his sword. Each strike chipped away at Ganon's health bar, which appeared in the top corner of Lex's vision. But the boss was relentless. It began to summon smaller enemies, pixelated bats that swooped in from the shadows. Lex switched tactics, using his shield to deflect bats while keeping an eye on Ganon. Multitasking, just like the old days, he grunted, parrying a bat and slicing it into pixels. The chat scrolled faster, comments blending into a blur of excitement and fear. Asterisk, he's actually doing it. Asterisk. Asterisk, that dodge was insane. Asterisk. Asterisk, my heart is pounding. Asterisk. Ethan felt the energy surge, not just from Lex, but from the thousands of viewers. Their collective focus was amplifying the stream, feeding Ethan in a way he'd never experienced. It was intoxicating, but he also noticed Lex's lives. 3 counter. It hadn't changed. Lex hadn't died once. That was unprecedented. Ganon Pixel entered a new phase. It raised its trident, and the room darkened. Lightning bolts shot from the ceiling, each one a jagged line of white pixels. Lex weaved through them, his movements becoming frantic. One bolt grazed his shoulder, and his health bar dropped by a quarter. He winced, his sprite flickering briefly. Okay, that hurt, Lex said, his voice tight. Need to find a safe spot. He spotted a pattern. The lightning avoided a small area near the wall where the torches were brightest. Lex dashed there, barely avoiding another bolt. Ganon charged again, but Lex was ready. He timed a jump, landing on the boss's back and driving his sword into its pixelated neck. Ganon Pixel roared in pain, its health bar dropping to 50%. The first phase was over. The boss staggered back, and the lightning stopped. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by Lex's heavy breathing and the hum of the stream. Phase 1 down. Lex panted, wiping sweat from his brow even though his sprite showed no such detail. But that took a lot out of me. Health's low, and I've used most of my stamina. He checked his inventory. He'd picked up a few items, a small health potion that restored a bit of HP, and a key that might unlock something later. But nothing that would help in a prolonged fight. Ethan watched, his core vibrating with conflicting emotions. Lex's skill was impressive, even thrilling. The steady energy from his focus was a valuable resource, different from the volatile rage of others. But if Lex beat this boss, he'd gain loot and experience, growing stronger. He could become a magnet for more skilled players, turning Ethan's dungeon into a playground for experts who might eventually find a way to dismantle it from within. The chat was exploding. Viewer count had doubled since the boss fight began. Lex's stream was trending, drawing attention from all over the world. Ethan could feel the ripple effects. The academies would be watching, and other gamers would be inspired to try. Ganon Pixel began to glow, signaling the start of Phase 2. Lex tightened his grip on his sword. Here we go again, chat. This is where we see if I've really got what it takes. As the boss lunged, Lex barely dodged, his sprite scraping against the wall. He was running on fumes, his movements slowing. Ethan realized that Lex might not survive the next phase. And for the first time, Ethan felt a pang of something like regret. This invader wasn't an enemy. He was a kindred spirit, someone who understood the beauty of the challenge. But the dungeon had rules. Ethan couldn't intervene directly. All he could do was watch as Lex faced the pixelated hell he'd created. The chapter ended with Lex parrying a trident strike, his shield cracking under the force. His last life counter flashed a warning red. On the stream, comments poured in, a torrent of support and panic. And in his core, Ethan made a silent calculation. Skilled players like Lex were a double-edged sword, a source of steady power, but also a potential threat that could unravel everything if left unchecked. The realization settled in his consciousness like a new line of code, cold and undeniable. The surge of energy from Lex's near victory against Ganon Pixel pulsed through Ethan's core like a steady heartbeat. Unlike the chaotic, rage-fueled bursts from previous invaders, this was different. A clean, focused current that hummed with something akin to appreciation. Ethan, the sentient dungeon core shaped like a vintage game console, floated in the central chamber of his domain, his glowing cube form casting pixelated light across the walls that shifted with his thoughts. He didn't just survive, he enjoyed it, Ethan mused, his consciousness replaying Lex's stream. The gamer's calm commentary, the precise dodges, the analytical approach to each puzzle. It was a stark contrast to the screaming frustration of the academy parties. The energy from Lex felt purer, more potent. It wasn't just about failure, it was about engagement. And with that realization, Ethan's core vibrated, new lines of code scrolling across his internal display. Level up. New abilities unlocked asterisk. Enemy AI customization asterisk adjust aggression patterns, movement speed, and attack timing for existing monsters. Loot table management asterisk design and distribute power-ups with specific effects and rarity tiers. Environmental tweaks asterisk modify trap placement and obstacle density in real time. Ethan focused his will. The central chamber's walls, previously static with 8-bit brick textures, now shimmered with interactive menus. He could see every floor of his dungeon as a schematic. Floor 1's Contra-style corridors, Floor 2's Mario-inspired platforms, Floor 3's Zelda puzzle rooms where Lex had just faced Ganon Pixel. With a thought, he selected a group of Goomba-like enemies on Floor 2. Their simple AI, previously set to walk left and right mindlessly, now offered options: aggressive charge, erratic hop, patrol with pauses. Ethan chose erratic hop, imagining invaders misjudging their jumps. He saved the change, and deep in the dungeon, the pixelated creatures began bouncing unpredictably. Next, the loot tables. Ethan remembered the one-up mushroom from earlier, a basic life restore. Now, he could create variety. He envisioned power-ups from his gaming past, translating them into dungeon logic. A fire flower appeared in his mind's eye, a red and white pixel bloom that would grant temporary projectile attacks to invaders. He set its rarity to uncommon, placing potential spawn points in tricky platforming sections. A star followed, a sparkling, invincible item that would make invaders temporarily immune to damage, but with a short duration. Rare, he decided, hiding it behind false walls or requiring sequence breaks to reach. He added a super mushroom for temporary health boosts and a bomb for area damage, each with detailed cooldowns and effects. The energy from Lex's stream seemed to fuel this creativity, the steady hum growing warmer. Let's give them something to chase, Ethan thought, a flicker of his old gamer competitiveness surfacing. But make them work for it. Meanwhile, far from the dungeon's depths, in the polished marble halls of the Human Academy's Central Command, a crisis meeting was underway. Commander Alistair Vance, a stern man in his 50s with a scar across his jawline, stood before a holographic display showing reports from the glitched dungeon. The room was filled with high-ranking officers, their faces grim under the cold light. Another party wiped, Vance said, his voice echoing in the silence. 4-2 this time. The tank was crushed by a giant walking mushroom, according to the last transmission. Their gear vanished, replaced by primitive sprites. Lives counted down like some archaic game. Mage Lieutenant Alara, a woman with sharp eyes and silver-tipped robes, leaned forward. Our scans confirm it's not a standard dungeon core. The energy signatures are erratic, shifting between nostalgia-based waveforms and something more sentient. It's learning, adapting. And now there's this streamer, added Tactical Officer Kale, pointing to a screen showing Lex's broadcast highlights. He's calling it the Retro Hell Dungeon. Made it to Floor 3, almost beat a boss. Viewership is skyrocketing. Gamers are flocking to the site, treating it like some challenge run. Vance's fist clenched. This is an embarrassment. Dungeons are meant to be cleared for resources, not turned into entertainment. This glitch is undermining our authority. If word spreads that a dungeon can strip our elites of their divine artifacts and turn them into pixels, morale will crumble. Alara nodded. The core is feeding on their frustration. Each failure makes it stronger. Our standard tactics are useless. Brute force just leads to more deaths. A heavy silence fell. Then, from the back of the room, a calm voice spoke. Perhaps we should stop treating it like a dungeon and start treating it like a game. All eyes turned to Professor Eris Thorne, a lean man in simple robes, known for his studies in system mechanics and game theory. He stepped forward, his expression analytical. I've analyzed the patterns. This dungeon operates on strict rules, limited lives, precise movements, hidden items. It's not random, it's designed. And if it's a game, then we need players who understand games better than anyone. Vance raised an eyebrow. What are you suggesting? The Elite Training Division's special unit, Thorne said. The ones we've been grooming not for combat, but for exploiting system loopholes and mechanics. Call them pro gamers if you will. They've mastered theory crafting, speedrunning tactics, and glitch exploitation. Send them in. Let them break this dungeon from the inside. Kale frowned. You mean Team Sigma? They're unconventional. Exactly, Thorne replied. While our warriors rely on strength, Team Sigma relies on intellect. They'll see past the pixels to the underlying code. If anyone can find a weakness, it's them. Vance considered this, watching Lex's stream on the hologram. The gamer dodging a pixelated sword swing with frame-perfect timing. Do it. Deploy Team Sigma immediately. I want this dungeon neutralized before it becomes a symbol. And monitor that streamer. If he gets too close to the core, eliminate him too. Back in the dungeon, Ethan was fine-tuning a new enemy on floor 3, a Darknut pixel, a heavily armored knight with a sword. He adjusted its AI to defensive stance, making it block more often but leave openings after combos. As he worked, he felt a shift in the energy flowing into his core. The steady hum from Lex's ongoing exploration. The gamer was now cautiously mapping floor 3's post-boss areas, finding hidden rooms with minor loot. Was suddenly pierced by a new sensation. It was cold, calculating, devoid of the hot rage or focused enjoyment he'd felt before. Ethan's core flickered, his awareness stretching toward the dungeon entrance. A party had just arrived, but unlike the others, they didn't charge in recklessly. They paused, assessing. Through his sensors, Ethan saw them. For figures, transformed into 8-bit sprites by his dungeon's rules, yet their postures were different. Their leader, a sprite with sharp, angular features and a cursor-like pointer above his head, was already scanning the environment. He gestured, and the party moved in sync. Not a warrior's charge, but a methodical advance, hugging walls, testing trap triggers with careful taps. Who are you? Ethan thought. His curiosity piqued. He focused his perception. Their energy signatures were optimized, like polished code, efficient and emotionless. He caught fragments of their communication, transmitted through the dungeon's systems. Initial analysis, Contra-style shooter layout. The leader's voice came through, cool and analytical. Enemy spawn points at coordinates 34, 78, and 67, 12. Trap patterns repeat every 120 frames. Loot probability low on this floor, but hidden paths likely exist. Another sprite, labeled with a minimap icon, responded. I'm detecting a warp whistle signature from the streamer's data. Should we sequence break to floor 3? Negative, the leader said. Clear floor 1 optimally first. We need baseline data. Remember, this isn't about survival. It's about deconstruction. Ethan felt a chill. These weren't invaders. They were analysts. Pro gamers, just as his new abilities had hinted at. They were here to dissect his dungeon, to turn his 8-bit hell into a solvable equation. For a moment, fear spiked in his core. What if they found a way to bypass everything? To shut him down? But then, the gamer in him stirred. A challenge, he thought. A flicker of excitement cutting through the cold. He accessed his new customization menus. On floor 1, he tweaked the fireball traps, increasing their speed by 10% and randomizing their spawn timing slightly. He adjusted the loot table, moving a fireflower power-up to a more obscure location behind a moving platform. He watched as the pro gamer party navigated the first corridor. They dodged the initial fireballs with ease, using pixel-perfect jumps that mirrored Lex's skill, but without any flair, just pure efficiency. One of them, a sprite with a data stream aura, paused at a wall. Glitch potential here, he reported. Wall texture inconsistency suggests a hidden passage. Testing. He performed a rapid series of jumps against the wall, and to Ethan's surprise, the sprite clipped slightly through the pixels, a minor exploit Ethan hadn't anticipated. The pro gamer didn't fully break through, but it was a warning. They were already probing for weaknesses. The leader nodded. Log it. We'll exploit it on the next pass if needed. Proceed to the first checkpoint. As they advanced, Ethan felt their cold energy seeping into his core. It wasn't fueling him with rage or enjoyment, but with something else, pressure, a demand to evolve. He realized this was the next level of his growth, not just from failure, but from competition. He turned his attention back to Lex, still exploring floor 3. The streamer had found a small treasure room, picking up a rupee loot item that granted minor mana regeneration. Lex smiled on the stream, chatting with his viewers about the clever design. This dungeon respects the classics, he said. It's brutal, but fair. I dig it. The contrast was stark. One invader appreciating the art, the others treating it as a problem to solve. Ethan's core pulsed with conflicting energies. He needed to prepare. With a thought, he began designing a new floor in the background, a concept for floor 4, inspired by Metroid's maze-like exploration, filled with power-up gates and hidden bosses. But that would take time. For now, he focused on the present. The pro gamers reached the first boss of Floor 1, a machine gun pixel enemy on a high platform. Instead of attacking head-on, they split up, using precise timing to lure its shots away, while one member scaled the platform from an angle Ethan hadn't intended. They defeated it without losing a single life, their movements clinical and coordinated. Too good, Ethan thought, his fear returning. But as they moved toward the exit pipe to Floor 2, he sensed something in their cold energy, a slight ripple. Overconfidence, perhaps, or the first crack in their perfect calculation. He activated his environmental tweaks. On Floor 2, he increased the density of bottomless pits near the start and added a few more erratic hop goombas. Let them deal with that. As the pro gamer party jumped into the warp pipe, their leader's final words echoed in Ethan's sensors. Phase 1 complete. Efficiency rating, 98%. Prepare for platforming analysis. Ethan's core glowed brighter, the cold energy from their approach settling around him like frost. He was no longer just a dungeon core feeding on rage. He was a game designer facing his toughest critics. And deep down, beneath the fear, a part of him, the gamer who had died and been reborn in this console form, was starting to enjoy this too. The chapter closed with Ethan hovering in his chamber, watching both Lex's warm stream and the pro gamer's cold advance on split mental screens. The dungeon had leveled up, but so had the stakes. And somewhere in the distance, he could almost hear the click of a controller, ready for the next round. The pixelated dust of Ganon's defeat settled in the boss chamber of Floor 3. Lex stood panting, his 8-bit sprite form flickering slightly with exhaustion. The massive, pig-like beast had dissolved into a shower of golden sparks, leaving behind a single, shimmering item floating in the center of the room. It was a sword, long, with a blue hilt and a blade that seemed to hum with latent energy. Above it, glowing text appeared. Master Sword. ATK plus 50, Def plus 20, Unique, Ignores Armor. Lex's stream chat exploded. Viewership had skyrocketed during the boss fight, now peaking at over 200,000 concurrent viewers. Comments scrolled too fast to read, but the emoji spam of swords and fire told the story. He reached out, his blocky hand closing around the hilt. The moment he touched it, a surge of warmth shot through his sprite. His stats, displayed in a corner of his vision, updated instantly. His attack power doubled, and a new, shimmering aura surrounded his character model. No way, Lex breathed. His voice transmitted clearly through his stream setup. This is insane loot. He gave the sword an experimental swing. It cut through the air with a satisfying shing sound, leaving a brief trail of blue pixels. Guys, this dungeon just keeps giving. That boss was brutal. Those fireball patterns were straight out of the original, but faster. Took me 3 tries to get the dodge timing right. He turned to face his virtual camera, a grin spreading across his real face, unseen by his audience, but evident in his tone. But we did it. Floor 3 clear. And look at this beauty. He held up the Master Sword, letting the light catch its pixelated edges. I'm telling you, this retro hell dungeon isn't just some glitch. It's a masterpiece. Someone out there is a genius. Deep within the dungeon's core, Ethan watched. His console-shaped form glowed with a steady, pulsing light. The energy from Lex's victory was different from the rage-fueled bursts he'd grown accustomed to. It was cleaner, sharper, a focused adrenaline that tasted of triumph rather than frustration. It still powered him, but it felt satisfying. As Lex exited the dungeon, teleporting out with his new prize, Ethan felt a ripple. The stream had ended, but its impact was just beginning. Over the next few days, the change was palpable. Ethan's sensors, extending like invisible tendrils through the dungeon's entrance cavern, detected a surge in traffic. Where before there had been trickles of arrogant academy parties or curious scouts, now there was a flood. Gamers, real gamers, with the hungry look of challenge seekers in their eyes, began to arrive. They came in small groups, often solo, armed not with godly gear, but with determination and, in some cases, makeshift streaming rigs. Ethan observed them all. His consciousness split across multiple floors, watching as a new party of 3 entered Floor 1. They were young, probably from one of the fringe settlements, dressed in patched clothing rather than academy robes. As they crossed the threshold, their forms pixelated into Contra-style sprites. Alives, 3 counter appeared above each of their heads. Okay, remember the tutorial Lex posted. Their leader, a girl with a braided sprite, said. The fireballs come in sets of 3. Time your jumps after the second. They moved cautiously, but Ethan noticed their coordination. They covered each other, calling out warnings. Still, the dungeon was merciless. One missed jump sent a boy tumbling into a bottomless pit. He respawned at the start, his lives now too. Damn it, that pit wasn't in the video. They randomized slightly, the girl replied, her voice tense. Keep focus. They pressed on, losing another life to a sneaky enemy spawn, but eventually, they reached the end of floor 1. As they jumped into the warp pipe to floor 2, Ethan felt a twinge of something. Pride? No, that was too sentimental. It was validation. His design was being appreciated, studied, overcome. The energy from their struggle was a mix, frustration at deaths, but also the thrill of small victories. It was more complex, richer than the pure rage of the early parties. Not all were so successful. Another group, overconfident from watching highlights, charged in and wiped on floor 1 within minutes, their lives evaporating in a series of poorly timed jumps. Their screams of anger fed Ethan a familiar, potent burst of power. He absorbed it, his core humming. The diversity was good. It made him stronger. As the days passed, Ethan's core evolved. The energy influx triggered a new prompt in his interface, glowing in green pixel text. Core evolution, multiplayer mode unlocked. He focused on it, and understanding flooded him. He could now design levels specifically for cooperative play. Floors where players could revive each other, share power-ups, face enemies that required teamwork to defeat. It was a game-changer. His mind raced with possibilities. He thought of the beat-em-up classics, games where you fought side-by-side through waves of foes. Double Dragon, Streets of Rage. Yes, that would be perfect. A floor where invaders had to brawl their way through urban pixel landscapes, using combos and environmental attacks. He began to design floor 4, not as a maze or puzzle, but as a straight-up brawler. He visualized it, a gritty, 8-bit cityscape with flickering neon signs, trash cans to throw, and gangs of enemy sprites that would swarm from both sides. The boss would be a massive, chain-wielding brute at the end of a long alleyway. As he crafted the level, placing spawn points and tweaking enemy AI to flank and surround, he kept one part of his awareness tuned to the entrance. The pro gamers, Team Sigma, were coming. He could feel their approach like a cold front moving in. Their energy was a sharp, calculated buzz, devoid of the chaotic emotions of the other invaders. They had cleared floor 1 with clinical efficiency, barely losing a life. Ethan had responded by subtly increasing trap speeds and randomizing some patterns, but they'd adapted almost instantly. They were a different kind of threat. Now, as he put the finishing touches on floor 4, adding a hidden health pack, power up behind a breakable dumpster, his sensors pinged. They were here. At the dungeon entrance, the cavern was lit by the soft glow of Ethan's core in the distance. 3 figures stepped out of the teleportation circle. They were dressed in sleek, gray uniforms with the academy insignia, a stylized sword and book, but these were no ordinary warriors. Their movements were economical, their eyes scanning the environment with detached analysis. The leader, a man with sharp features and close-cropped hair, smirked. His name was Kale, and he was the strategist of Team Sigma. Sensor readings confirmed the dungeon's energy output has increased by 18% since our last scan, said the woman beside him, Lyra. She held a data pad that glowed with scrolling code. Player traffic is up, mostly non-academy gamers. The third member, a bulky man named Rourke, cracked his knuckles. His sprite form, when it manifested, would likely be a powerhouse. Let's just get in there and break this glitch. I'm tired of hearing about it. Kale's smirk didn't fade. Patience, Rourke. This dungeon is an anomaly. It operates on game logic, old game logic. That makes it predictable. We've trained for this. We'll sequence break, exploit spawn rates, and clear it faster than that streamer did. The academies want it shut down, and we're going to deliver. He glanced at the core's glow. But first, we observe. Lyra, full scan. I want to know every tweak it's made since our last entry. As Lyra's devices whirred, Ethan watched from within. He felt their confidence like a physical pressure. They weren't here to play. They were here to dismantle. And they were good. Too good. He focused on his new floor 4. It was ready, a brutal, double dragon-style gauntlet designed to test coordination and raw combat skill. He'd made it harder than the previous floors, with enemy swarms and limited healing. It would be the perfect filter. But as he watched Kale's smirk, a cold realization settled in Ethan's mind. These pros might just have the skill to plow through it anyway. They were the ultimate test of his design. And if they succeeded, what then? Would the academies send more? Would they find a way to destroy his core? He pushed the fear aside. Fear was for invaders. He was the dungeon. He had one advantage they didn't. He could change the game at any moment. As Team Sigma finished their scan and stepped forward, their forms beginning to pixelate into sprites, Ethan activated floor 4. The warp pipe at the end of floor 3 now led to a new, dark alleyway flickering with pixelated rain. Kale's sprite solidified, a lean, agile model with a data visor. He looked at his teammates, their sprites now resembling a tech mage and a bruiser. Remember the plan. Stick to the exploits. This dungeon thinks it's clever, but we're smarter. They moved into floor 1, and Ethan watched as they executed perfect wall jumps over the first fireball trap, bypassing it entirely. They were fast, efficient, and utterly cold. But as they progressed, Ethan felt a new energy stirring elsewhere. More gamers were entering, inspired by Lex's success. A party of 4, laughing and joking, pixelated at the entrance. They were here for the challenge, for the fun. The contrast was stark. On one side, the clinical precision of Team Sigma, a weapon aimed at his heart. On the other, the chaotic, enthusiastic swarm of gamers, there to play his game. Ethan's core pulsed with the influx of both. He needed the gamers, their energy, their passion, to grow. But he needed to stop Team Sigma to survive. As Kale and his team breezed through floor 2, barely touching the platforms, Ethan finalized floor 4. He added one last touch, a hidden mechanic. If players worked together to perform a simultaneous attack on certain enemies, they'd trigger a team-up bonus, dealing extra damage. It was a nod to the co-op spirit, a test he doubted Team Sigma would pass. The chapter closed with Ethan's focus split. He watched Team Sigma reach the end of floor 3, where Lex had earned the Master Sword. They didn't bother with the boss. They used a glitch to clip through a wall, skipping it entirely. Kale's smirk was visible even on his sprite face as they jumped into the new warp pipe, descending into the rain-slicked alleys of floor 4. At the same time, the party of 4 gamers died hilariously on floor 1, their rage fueling Ethan in a familiar burst. He absorbed it all, his core glowing brighter. The game was changing. The players were multiplying. And the pros were now in his newest, most brutal level. The real challenge was just beginning. The entrance to Ethan's dungeon shimmered with pixelated light as Team Sigma stepped through. Kale, their leader, didn't hesitate. He strode forward with the confidence of someone who'd studied every frame of every game ever coded. Behind him moved 3 others. Lyra, the strategist with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Torin, the brute force specialist who preferred smashing through problems. And Sarah, the technical expert who could find exploits in the most rigid code. As they crossed the threshold, the familiar transformation washed over them. Their academy-forged armor and enchanted weapons dissolved into shimmering particles, replaced by blocky 8-bit sprites. Kale's form became a blue-clad soldier with exaggerated shoulders, Lyra a green-robed mage with oversized glasses, Torin a hulking red warrior, and Sarah a purple-clad rogue with nimble animations. Above each of their heads, the glowing counter appeared. Lives, 3. Kale didn't even glance at it. Standard retro transformation protocol, he said. His voice filtered through the sprite's limited audio channels to sound tinny and compressed. Just as the reports described. Lyra, initial analysis. Lyra's sprite adjusted its glasses, a programmed animation that somehow conveyed her analytical nature. Physics engine appears to be running on a modified Contra framework. Gravity constant at 9.8 pixels per frame squared. Collision detection is pixel perfect, not hitbox-based. Interesting. Ethan watched from his core chamber, the glowing console at the dungeon's heart pulsing with nervous energy. He'd felt their approach, a cold, calculated presence unlike the chaotic emotions of previous invaders. These weren't arrogant warriors or excited gamers. These were surgeons coming to dissect him. They're not even reacting to the transformation, Ethan thought. his consciousness swirling through the dungeon's code. They expected it. They prepared. On floor 1, the Contra-style corridor stretched before Team Sigma. Fireballs launched from rotating turrets. Moving platforms swung on invisible pendulums, and bottomless pits gaped at regular intervals. The level that had slaughtered dozens of academy parties now looked almost quaint. Kale raised a hand. Sequence break, protocol alpha. Execute. What happened next made Ethan's code shiver. Torin charged toward the first fireball turret, not to dodge, but to collide with it at a precise angle. As the fireball launched, he jumped at the exact frame it left the barrel, his sprite clipping through the projectile's hitbox. Not around it. Through it. Glitch exploitation, Ethan realized with dawning horror. They're using the game's own programming errors against me. Lyra followed, running toward a wall that should have been solid. Instead, she jumped at a 45-degree angle, her sprite bouncing off the surface at an impossible trajectory, wall jumping in a game engine that shouldn't support it. She sailed over 3 platforms in a single bound, bypassing the entire first obstacle course. Sarah found a different exploit. She crouched in a specific corner, her sprite flickering as she mashed an invisible button combination. Suddenly, she phased through the floor, falling into what should have been solid ground. A second later, she reappeared 50 pixels ahead, having skipped a deadly gauntlet of moving saw blades. How are they doing this? Ethan's thoughts raced through his systems. I coded those walls as solid. The collision detection, then he saw it. In his haste to create authentic 8-bit physics, he'd replicated the original game's bugs. The same glitches speedrunners had exploited for decades. These pro gamers hadn't just studied his dungeon. They'd memorized every programming quirk of the source material. Kale took the most direct route. He didn't dodge or glitch. He simply walked through the level with inhuman timing, his sprite moving with frame-perfect precision. When fireballs launched, he was already 2 pixels to the left. When platforms swung, he stepped onto them at the exact moment they reached their apex. He didn't run, he calculated. Within 3 minutes, Team Sigma reached the end of floor 1. The boss, a giant pixelated machine gun turret from Contra, barely had time to activate before Torin clipped through its hitbox and Sarah exploited a damage multiplier glitch. The turret exploded in a shower of pixels. Lives remaining. 3, 3, 3, 3. They hadn't lost a single life. Ethan felt a cold dread unlike anything since his first moments as a dungeon core. These invaders weren't playing his game. They were dismantling it. The energy he normally harvested from frustration and failure was minimal here, just faint wisps of annoyance when a glitch didn't execute perfectly. They were too controlled, too clinical. Floor 1 cleared, Kale reported, his sprite standing at the warp pipe to floor 2. Time, 2 minutes 47 seconds. 17 seconds slower than projected. Lyra. Minor variance in enemy spawn timers, Lyra said, her sprite consulting a floating data screen that shouldn't exist in 8-bit aesthetics. The dungeon core appears to have randomized some elements. Adaptive AI, perhaps. Noted. Proceed to floor 2. Maintain exploitation efficiency at 80% or higher. As they jumped into the warp pipe, Ethan panicked. His consciousness flashed through options. He couldn't redesign the levels on the fly. The core programming required stability. But there were toggles. Settings he'd buried deep in the code, thinking he'd never need them. Hard mode. The concept had come to him during a late-night coding session, a nostalgic nod to games that offered expert settings. He'd implemented it as a hidden administrator function. Increase enemy speed by 50%, reduce checkpoint frequency, randomize trap patterns, and, most crucially, apply patches to the most egregious glitches. It'll break the authentic 8-bit experience, he'd thought at the time. But maybe for special occasions. This was that occasion. Ethan reached into his code, finding the toggle. It glowed with warning symbols. Hard mode activation will temporarily override authenticity settings. Proceed? He didn't hesitate. Across the dungeon, subtle changes rippled through reality. The pixelated fireballs on floor 1 now moved faster, their animation frames skipping to create a blur effect. Checkpoints, previously placed every 30 seconds of optimal play, vanished, leaving only the starting point. Trap patterns, once predictable, began shifting in semi-random sequences. But most importantly, the glitches started healing. On floor 2, Team Sigma emerged from the warp pipe into the Super Mario-inspired platforming hell. This level had claimed more lives than any other, with its disappearing blocks, bottomless pits, and Hammer Brothers-style enemies throwing pixel-perfect projectiles. Kale immediately went for the first sequence break, a wall jump that should have carried him over the initial gap. His sprite leaped toward the wall, angled perfectly, and bounced off normally, falling toward the pit below. For the first time, Kale's composure cracked. His sprite twisted in midair, executing a last-second spin that saved him from the pit but left him off balance. He landed awkwardly on the edge, 1 pixel from falling. Glitch patched, Lyra observed, her data screen flickering. Wall collision detection has been reinforced. The core is adapting. Impossible, Sarah said, her sprite attempting her own phase-through-floor exploit at a known weak spot. Instead of clipping through, she collided with solid ground. These are engine-level exploits. You can't patch them without rewriting the entire physics system. Apparently it can, Torin grumbled, his sprite testing a damage multiplier against a Goomba. The enemy took normal damage instead of exploding instantly. Hard mode toggle. I've seen it in the old ROMs. Hidden developer settings. Kale's sprite straightened, and though its 8-bit face couldn't show expression, Ethan felt the sudden shift in energy. Annoyance. Frustration. The first real emotional spike since they'd entered. Adaptation protocol. Kale ordered. Switch from exploitation to optimization. We play it straight. For the next 10 minutes, Ethan watched something extraordinary. Without their glitches, Team Sigma had to actually navigate his levels. And they were good. Not just good, masterful. Lyra calculated jump trajectories in real time, calling out frame counts. Platform 3 will disappear in 12 frames. Jump on frame 8 for optimal clearance. Torin handled the enemies with brutal efficiency, timing his attacks to interrupt enemy animations at their most vulnerable frames. He didn't waste movement. Every step served a purpose. Sarah found the hidden warp whistles Ethan had buried as secrets, not through glitches but through pattern recognition. The brick texture repeats every 16 pixels except here, she noted, her sprite tapping a specific block. A warp whistle appeared, but hard mode was taking its toll. The increased speed meant their frame-perfect timing had to be even more precise. The reduced checkpoints meant mistakes carried greater consequences. On a particularly brutal section, a gauntlet of moving platforms over instant-death lava, Torin finally slipped. His pixel-perfect jump came 1 frame late. His sprite clipped the edge of a platform, the collision detection now unforgiving in hard mode. He tumbled into the lava. Pixel explosion. Torin respawned at the section start, his lives counter ticking down to 2. First life lost, Lyra reported, her voice still calm but tighter now. Platform speed variance is plus or minus 2% random. Can't perfectly predict. Compensate, Kale said, but Ethan heard the strain. The clinical detachment was cracking. They pushed forward, reaching the final obstacle before the floor 2 boss. A corridor of spike traps that extended and retracted in patterns Ethan had made deliberately deceptive. In normal mode, they followed a complex but learnable sequence. In hard mode, he'd added a randomizer. Every third extension was faster or slower by an unpredictable amount. Kale went first, analyzing the pattern. Extension for 40 frames, retraction for 20. Standard. Next extension in 3, 2, 1. The spikes shot out faster than projected, missing his sprite by a single pixel. Variance detected, Lyra said. Random element introduced. Probability analysis? Insufficient data. Recommend caution. They proceeded slowly, testing each trap. Sarah mapped the randomness, finding it wasn't truly random, but seeded from an algorithm she couldn't immediately crack. It's using something as a seed value. Maybe our movement patterns? Halfway through the corridor, they thought they'd solved it. Kale had identified what seemed to be a pattern in the randomness. It's cycling through 3 variance profiles. I've mapped 2. The third should be, he stepped forward. The spikes extended normally for the first half of their animation, then accelerated mid-extension, a trick Ethan had coded specifically for hard mode. Kale's sprite tried to backpedal, but the spikes were too fast. They caught his left side. Pixel explosion. He respawned just behind the trap that killed him. Lives, too. Before anyone could react, Lyra, following too close behind, misjudged the retraction timing. The spikes hadn't fully withdrawn when she moved forward. Pixel explosion. 2 lives lost in 3 seconds. For the first time, Kale's composure shattered completely. His sprite, a blocky 8-bit representation, somehow conveyed rage through its rigid animations. What in the 7 hells was that? The tinny voice filter couldn't hide the fury. Mid-animation acceleration? That's not authentic 8-bit. That's not in any of the source material. Ethan felt it then, a surge of energy so potent it made his core vibrate. Not just frustration, but outrage. The violation of expectations. These pros who thought they knew everything about games were facing something outside their databases. A dungeon core that could change the rules. Hard mode includes developer-only mechanics, Sarah said, her sprite examining the spikes. I've read about this in debug menus. The original Contra developers had trap variants they removed for being too unfair. So the core is using cut content against us, Kale spat. His sprite clenched its pixelated fists. Fine. We adapt again. But mark this, when we reach that core, I'm going to personally dismantle every line of its code. The energy from his rage washed over Ethan, sweet and powerful. For the first time since Team Sigma entered, Ethan didn't feel panic. He felt a challenge. These weren't invincible exploiters anymore. They were players in his game, and they'd just lost 2 lives to a spike trap. As Team Sigma regrouped, more cautious now, their leader's curses still echoing in the pixelated air, Ethan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The pros could be beaten. They could bleed. They could rage. And their rage would fuel his ascent to levels even the academies couldn't imagine. The pixelated corridors of Floor 2 hummed with a new, frantic energy. Ethan's core, a glowing cube of crystalline circuits and retro plastic casing, pulsed in time with the rapid-fire beeps and boops of the level's recoded hazards. From his vantage, a floating perspective woven into the dungeon's very code, he watched Team Sigma's remaining sprites stumble through the platforming gauntlet. Torin, the party's tank now rendered as a blocky warrior with a pixelated shield, had just respawned at the last checkpoint. His lives counter blinked a desperate 1 above his head. The platforms here were no longer the predictable, scrolling ledges of the original design. Ethan had cranked their speed to near impossible levels, each one jerking left or right with randomized timing. The air crackled with pixel fire that spat from wall-mounted turrets in staccato bursts. Move, Kale's voice, filtered through the sprite's tinny speaker, echoed in the chamber. His mage avatar hovered mid-air, robes fluttering in 8-bit waves. The patterns shifting every 3rd cycle. Watch the left turret. Lyra, their rogue, was already in motion. Her sprite dashed forward, a blur of brown and green pixels, and leaped onto a platform just as it slid sideways. She landed with perfect precision, knees bending in a jerky animation. But the platform accelerated without warning. Another of Ethan's tweaks, and she overshot, fingers grazing the edge before plummeting into the bottomless pit below. A shower of rainbow pixels erupted, and her lives counter dropped from 2 to 1. She respawned beside Torin, her sprite flickering with residual static. Damn it, Lyra muttered, her voice tight. The acceleration is mid-jump now. That's not in any documented pattern. Kale floated down beside them, his staff glowing with a weak, pixelated light. He's patching in real time. This dungeon isn't just glitched, it's learning. Ethan felt a thrill at that. Yes, he was learning. Every death, every frustrated curse, fed his core. The energy from Kale's earlier outbursts still coursed through him, a warm, buzzing current that had unlocked new lines of code. He could feel the dungeon expanding, his consciousness stretching into uncharted memory banks. But with it came a twinge of something else, a flicker of unease. Because while Team Sigma struggled, another signal had pinged on his sensors. A new party was approaching the dungeon entrance. Not the arrogant elites of the human academies, nor the coldly efficient pros. This group's energy was different, a crackle of excitement, a hum of genuine curiosity. Ethan split his focus, pulling up a secondary view. Outside, in the rain-slicked ruins of what was once a city park, 5 figures stood before the dungeon's entrance, a shimmering portal of cascading pixels. At their lead was Lex, the streamer from days prior. His armor was simpler now, a leather jerkin and worn boots, but his eyes held a fierce, focused light. Beside him were 4 others: a burly dwarf with a hammer, a slender elf clutching a lute, a human woman with a staff crackling with arcane energy, and a halfling who kept adjusting a pair of oversized goggles. "This is it," Lex said, his voice broadcast through a tiny, floating orb, a streaming device. "The Retro Hell Dungeon. Chat's been blowing up since my last run. Today, we're doing this as a guild. The Pixel Pioneers. We clear floors together, share strats, and maybe, just maybe, find out what's at the bottom of this 8-bit nightmare." His companions nodded, their expressions a mix of nerves and determination. The dwarf, Borin, hefted his hammer. "Heard the academies sent their best. Got wiped on floor 2. Then we'll be better," Lex replied, a grin tugging at his lips. "We're not here for glory or loot. We're here to play." Ethan watched, his core pulsing with conflicting signals. Lex's energy was clean, not the bitter rage of Team Sigma, nor the blind arrogance of the early invaders. It was the focused intensity of a gamer facing a tough level, the kind of energy that fueled steady, sustained growth rather than explosive bursts. Part of Ethan wanted to nurture that, to design levels that challenged but rewarded skill, to build a community around his dungeon, a haven for those who saw the beauty in pixel-perfect jumps and cryptic secrets. But another part, the part that remembered dying in a car crash as the system apocalypse tore the world apart, hissed a warning. Team Sigma was still inside. They were adapting. Kale was already mapping the new platform patterns, calling out shifts in timing. Lyra was experimenting with shorter jumps, her sprite moving with cautious grace. Torin, despite his single life, was using his shield to block turret fire, creating safe zones for the others. "They're too good," Ethan thought, his core vibrating with anxiety. Asterisk, if they beat my levels, what happens to me? Do I fade? Reset? Asterisk, the system had been vague on that. Only that a dungeon core's power was tied to Invaders' failures. But Lex represented a different path. One where success could also fuel growth, if handled right. Back on floor 2, disaster struck. Torin, emboldened by a lull in turret fire, made a dash for a distant platform. It was a long jump, the kind that required a running start and perfect timing. He sprinted, his sprite's pixels blurring, and leaped. For a second, he hung in the air, shield raised triumphantly. Then the platform dropped 6 inches, a new trap Ethan had coded in moments ago, inspired by a particularly cruel Super Mario hack. Torin's sprite slammed into the side of the ledge, fingers scrabbling at nothing, before falling into the void. Lives 0. His sprite dissolved into a burst of golden pixels. No respawn. Torin was out, his consciousness presumably ejected from the dungeon. A wave of energy washed over Ethan, sharp and satisfying, laced with Torin's final, wordless shout of frustration. But it was thinner than before. The pro was learning to control his emotions, even in defeat. "Torin's down," Kale said, his voice cold. "Lyra with me. We're switching to evasion protocol. No more risks." They moved as one, a well-oiled machine. Lyra darted ahead, scouting trap triggers, while Kale hovered behind, analyzing code fluctuations. They reached the end of the platforming section, a sheer wall with a single, glowing warp pipe. It hummed with a soft, green light. "A skip," Lyra breathed. This wasn't here in the earlier logs. Kale floated closer, his staff poking at the pipe. "It's new. Fresh code. The core is expanding mid-run." He glanced back, his sprite's face a mask of blocky determination. "This leads deeper, possibly to an unfinished floor." "Do we take it?" Lyra asked. "We have no choice. The main path is likely rigged with more surprises. This might be a shortcut, or a trap." Kale's sprite straightened. "But we're Team Sigma. We adapt." They jumped into the pipe, their sprites vanishing in a swirl of pixels. Ethan pulled his focus back, his core humming with exertion. He'd been multitasking, watching Team Sigma, monitoring Lex's guild, and furiously coding a new floor. The energy from Torin's demise had unlocked a fresh set of assets: sprawling, labyrinthine tile sets, eerie ambient music, and a new enemy type: floating, jelly-like blobs that split on impact. He'd called it Floor 4. A Metroid-inspired maze, non-linear and filled with hidden passages. It was his most complex creation yet, a web of corridors and chambers that required power-ups to fully explore. And Team Sigma was heading straight for it. thanks to that warp whistle he'd absent-mindedly left active, a relic from an earlier design phase. Stupid, he chided himself. Asterisk, but maybe it's for the best. Let them get lost in the maze. Buy me time. Asterisk. His sensors pinged again. Lex's guild had entered floor 1. Ethan switched views, watching as the 5 of them materialized in the Contra-style corridor. Their gear vanished, replaced by 8-bit sprites, but unlike the earlier parties, they didn't panic. Lex's avatar, a lean warrior with a pixelated sword, looked around, his blocky face scanning the environment. Okay, pioneers, Lex said, his voice calm. Remember the rules. 3 lives each. Checkpoints are sparse. Boren, you take point. Alara, watch for hidden triggers. Finn, keep that loot ready. We might need a buff if the music shifts. They moved forward, a cohesive unit. Boren blocked fireballs with his hammer, his sprite moving with surprising agility. Alara, the elf, spotted a hidden alcove and darted in, emerging with a 1-up mushroom that she tossed to Lex. For later, she said, her voice melodic even through the sprite's filter. Ethan felt that strange warmth again. This was fun. They were playing his game as it was meant to be played, with teamwork, with respect for the mechanics. He could feel a steady trickle of energy from their focus, a gentle stream compared to the violent surges of Team Sigma's failures. It was sustainable, healthy, but then his core shuddered. A warning flashed in his consciousness. Floor 4 breached. Team Sigma had arrived. He snapped his attention back. Kale and Lyra stood in a vast, dark chamber. The walls were made of pulsating, organic-looking pixels, and the air thrummed with a low, synthesized drone. Corridors branched off in 3 directions, each one shrouded in shadow. A maze, Kale murmured. Non-linear. We'll need to map it. Lyra nodded, her sprite pulling out a tiny, pixelated notebook, an item she'd somehow retained from her inventory. I'll mark the paths. Watch for ambushes. They chose the left corridor, moving slowly. Within minutes, they encountered the first of the jelly blobs. It floated toward them, a shimmering mass of purple pixels. Kale fired a magic missile, and the blob split into 2 smaller ones, each moving faster. Splitting enemies, Lyra noted, ducking under one. Classic Metroid. We'll need a specific power-up to clear them efficiently. Then we find it. Kale said, his voice grim. This core thinks it can outsmart us with nostalgia. But we've trained for this. Every game has a logic. We'll crack it. Ethan watched, his anxiety mounting. They were too methodical, too calm. The energy from their progress was minimal, a faint hum of concentration. He needed them to fail, to rage, to fuel his growth against the Academy's inevitable escalation. But Lex's guild, they represented something else. A future where his dungeon wasn't just a glitch to be erased, but a challenge to be celebrated. I'm torn, he realized, his core flickering with indecision. Asterisk, do I crush the pros to survive? Or do I nurture the gamers to thrive? Asterisk. For now, he had no choice but to do both. He poured energy into floor 4, expanding the maze, adding dead ends and hidden passages. He watched Kale and Lyra navigate deeper, their mapping slowly revealing the layout. And he kept one eye on Lex, who was now leading his guild through floor 1 with flawless precision. Their teamwork a beautiful, synchronized dance of pixels and timing. As the chapter drew to a close, Kale and Lyra stumbled upon a large, sealed door. It was emblazoned with a familiar icon, a pixelated, winged creature. Ridley, from Metroid. But this version was Ethan's own design, its eyes glowing with corrupted code. A boss chamber, Lyra said, her voice hushed. Kale floated closer, examining the door. It's locked. We'll need a key, probably hidden in one of these passages. He turned, his sprite's gaze sweeping the dark corridors. Split up. Cover more ground. Meet back here in 10. They parted ways, each heading down a different tunnel. Ethan felt a chill as they disappeared into the maze. Splitting up was a risk, but in their confidence, they didn't see it. He could manipulate the layout, trap them, isolate them. The energy from their potential failures beckoned. But then he looked back at Lex, who had just reached the end of floor 1, his guild intact, all lives remaining. Lex raised his sword in a pixelated salute, and his stream orb captured the moment, broadcasting it to thousands. The chat scrolled with messages of awe and encouragement. Ethan's core pulsed, a slow, steady rhythm. The pros were in the maze, searching for a key. The gamers were at the gates, ready for floor 2. And he, the dungeon core, hovered between them, a sentient console crafting hells and heavens out of 8-bit dreams. The game was evolving, and he was no longer just a designer. He was a player, too, fighting for his own survival in a world that demanded both destruction and creation. He took a deep, metaphorical breath and began coding the next trap. The warp pipe deposited Kale and Lyra into darkness so profound it felt like being swallowed by a pixelated void. For a moment, there was only the hum of ancient electronics, a low, persistent buzz that vibrated through the floor. Then, with a series of mechanical clicks, lights flickered on overhead. Floor 4 wasn't a corridor or a platforming gauntlet. It was a maze. Kale's sprite form, a blocky warrior with a sword that looked like it was made of Lego, stiffened as he took in the surroundings. The walls were metallic gray, etched with glowing green circuit patterns that pulsed like veins. Corridors branched in 3 directions, each identical, stretching into shadowy distances where the lights hadn't yet activated. The air smelled of ozone and dust, like an old arcade cabinet left in an attic. A maze, Lyra muttered, her mage sprite's robes pixelating at the edges. Her voice echoed slightly, swallowed by the vastness. The dungeon's adapting. Non-linear progression. We need to map this. Kale nodded, his mind already calculating. Back in the academies, they'd trained for dungeon crawls, straightforward assaults with clear objectives. This felt different. Wrong. The system Apocalypse had standardized everything into stats and skills, but this dungeon, it played by older rules. Rules from a time before the system, when games were about patience and pattern recognition, not brute force. Split up, Kale decided, his tone clipped. We'll cover more ground. Look for power-ups or keys. The warp pipe brought us here for a reason. There must be a boss chamber. Lyra hesitated. The last time we split up, Torin was careless. Kale cut in, though a flicker of guilt crossed his features. His sprite's expression didn't change. It was frozen in a determined grimace, but his thoughts churned. Torin had been a friend, reduced to pixels on floor 2. The memory fueled a cold anger. We're pros. We exploit weaknesses. This maze is a weakness. It's too big for one core to monitor perfectly. We find the glitches, break the sequence. Without another word, he took the left corridor. Lyra watched him go, then turned right, her staff glowing with a soft blue light, a spell she'd retained despite the transformation. The middle path remained untaken, a silent invitation. Ethan watched from his core chamber, a glowing cube floating in a space that resembled a retro gaming den. Screens surrounded him, displaying feeds from every corner of the dungeon. Floor 4 was his newest creation, inspired by the Metroid games he'd loved in his past life. A maze of interconnected rooms, secrets hidden behind false walls, power-ups that granted new abilities. He felt the pro's presence like static on an old TV. Kale's energy was sharp, focused, a blade of cold calculation. Lyra's was warmer, tinged with worry, but no less determined. As they moved, Ethan manipulated the maze with a thought. Walls shifted silently, corridors elongating, dead ends appearing where exits had been. It was like playing God with a level editor and a part of him, the gamer he'd once been, thrilled at the challenge. But his attention was divided. On another screen, Lex's guild, the Pixel Pioneers, had just cleared floor 1. They moved as a unit, 5 sprites in complementary colors. Lex as a red-clad warrior, others as a blue mage, a green archer, a yellow thief, and a white healer. They'd navigated the Contra corridor with practiced ease, sharing tips over voice chat Ethan could faintly hear through the dungeon's sensors. Watch for the fireball pattern. It's 3 fast, 1 slow, Lex said, his voice calm, almost cheerful. And don't forget to check the ceiling for hidden 1-ups. They'd found 2 power-ups already, restoring lives lost to unlucky jumps. Their energy flowed into Ethan's core not as rage, but as a steady, warm current. The satisfaction of a challenge met, the joy of play. It was nice. Alien, after feeding on frustration for so long. Ethan's core pulsed, a mix of colors. He was growing stronger, but torn. The pros were a threat. They'd adapt. They'd break his dungeon if he let them. Lex's guild represented something else, a community. Gamers who saw his creation not as a glitch, but as art. He could feel his power diversifying, new options unlocking in his interface. Co-op mode, speedrun timers, community challenges. Focus, he told himself. The pros first. Kale moved through the maze with predatory grace. His sprite's movements were precise, each step measured. He'd already hit 3 dead ends. Walls that hadn't been there moments before, he was sure of it. The dungeon was alive, cheating. It made his blood boil, but he channeled the anger into focus. In a small chamber, he found a pedestal. On it sat a glowing orb, pulsing with a soft blue light. As he approached, text appeared in the air, pixelated and green. Morph ball acquired. Press down to transform. Kale frowned. A power-up. The dungeon's loot system was absurd, literal game items. He reached out, and the orb dissolved into his sprite. A new icon appeared on his HUD, a ball. Experimentally, he pressed down on an imaginary D-pad. His sprite collapsed, folding into a perfect, rolling sphere. He could move faster now, and small tunnels opened in the walls. Passages he hadn't noticed before, too tight for his warrior form. A grin touched his lips. This was an exploit. He rolled into one tunnel, emerging in a hidden room. There, on another pedestal, was a key. It looked like a giant pixelated skeleton key, glowing gold. Boss chamber key, the text read. Kale grabbed it, and a map fragment flashed in his mind. A layout of the maze, with a red X marking a distant room. Lyra, he whispered into his comms, a system that somehow still worked in sprite form. I found a key, and a power-up. This maze is full of secrets. Meet me at the central junction. But static crackled in reply. The dungeon was interfering. Lyra wasn't as lucky. She'd taken a corridor that spiraled downward, into a section of the maze that felt colder, darker. The circuit patterns on the walls here were red, pulsing like warning lights. She'd cast detection spells, but they fizzled. The dungeon's rules limited magic to basic attacks. She turned a corner and froze. The corridor ended in a solid wall, but as she approached, it shimmered, revealing itself as an illusion. Beyond was a large, circular chamber. In the center, suspended by cables from the ceiling, was a massive egg-shaped pod, covered in blinking lights. A low growl echoed through the room. The pod cracked open, and something unfolded from within. It was a dragon, but not like any from the system's bestiaries. This was pixel art brought to life, a reskined Ridley from Metroid, all sharp angles and glowing purple scales. Its wings spread, blocking the light, and its eyes fixed on Lyra with malevolent intelligence. A health bar appeared above it, thick and red. Ridley boss, phase 1. Lyra's breath caught. She had 2 lives left. Her sprite's hands tightened on her staff. Kale, she said into the comms, but only static answered. The boss's mouth opened, energy gathering in a bright, deadly beam. Ethan watched the boss chamber feed, his core humming with anticipation. Ridley was one of his favorite designs, a brutal, pattern-based fight. He'd programmed it himself. Dodge the beam, avoid the tail swipes, shoot the glowing weak spot on the chest. For a solo mage, it would be nearly impossible. But Lyra was a pro. She didn't panic. As the beam fired, she rolled, a pixel-perfect dodge that left her sprite unscathed. She retaliated with a magic missile, a simple spell that chipped at Ridley's health bar. The boss roared, swooping down, claws extended. Meanwhile, Kale was using the morph ball to navigate. He'd found another hidden room. This one with an energy tank power-up. It restored one of his lost lives, bringing him back to 3. He was mapping the maze in his head, piecing together the layout from fragments. He could feel the dungeon resisting, walls shifting to lead him away from Lyra's location. But he was adapting, learning the patterns. On floor 1, Lex's guild had reached the warp pipe to floor 2. They paused, discussing strategy. Should we try the platforming section? Asked the healer, a sprite named Mara. Not yet, Lex said. Let's see if there's a warp to floor 4. The pros are ahead of us. We need to catch up, but carefully. This dungeon rewards exploration. They found a hidden block, revealing a warp whistle. With a cheer, they used it, vanishing into a pipe that led not to floor 2, but directly to floor 4, a shortcut Ethan had left for skilled players. They emerged in a different section of the maze, far from the pros. Ethan felt the energy surge as both groups navigated his creation. From the pros, sharp, intense focus, edged with frustration as they hit dead ends. From Lex's guild, collaborative excitement, the thrill of discovery. His core glowed brighter, new data streaming in. He unlocked an ability, dynamic difficulty. He could now adjust the maze in real time based on player skill. He applied it to Kale. The walls around the pro leader shifted faster, corridors twisting into knots. Kale cursed, his morph ball form bouncing off a newly appeared barrier. But he didn't stop. He found a glitch, a spot where two walls overlapped, allowing him to clip through. Ethan's code screamed in protest, but it held. The pro was breaking the rules. Lyra was on her last life. Ridley's health was at 50%, but she'd taken 2 hits, one from a tail swipe, one from a fireball. Her sprite flickered, the lives, one counter flashing red above her head. She was cornered against a wall, the boss looming over her, energy gathering for a final beam. She closed her eyes, thinking of Torin. They'd trained together for years. This couldn't be how it ended, in some ridiculous retro game. But as the beam charged, a voice crackled in her comms. Lyra, I'm close. I have the key. The boss chamber is to your east. There's a door behind Ridley. Kale. He'd broken through the maze, using the morph ball to access a vent that led directly to her chamber. He emerged from a small opening in the wall, his sprite reforming into warrior form, the boss chamber key glowing in his hand. Ridley turned, distracted. Lyra didn't hesitate. She rolled, the beam scorching the wall where she'd been, and sprinted toward the door Kale had indicated. It was hidden behind a tapestry of circuit patterns, but with the key, it glowed. Kale threw the key. It arced through the air, pixel perfect, and slotted into the door. With a grinding sound, it opened, revealing a tunnel. Go! Kale shouted, charging Ridley, his sword flashing. He wasn't trying to kill the boss, just by time. Lyra dove through the door, into darkness. The tunnel sloped upward, and she emerged in a control room of sorts, a small space with monitors showing feeds of the dungeon. One screen focused on Kale, now dueling Ridley alone, his lives down to 2. She could see the boss's pattern on the monitors. The beam charged every 10 seconds, after 3 claw swipes. Kale was dodging, but barely. He was too focused on offense, not defense. Kale, listen, she yelled into the comms. It's a pattern. Dodge left after the 3rd swipe, then hit the chest. On the feed, Kale heard her. He adjusted, his movements becoming fluid. He dodged left, Ridley's beam missing by pixels, then struck the glowing weak spot. The boss roared, health dropping to 25%. But Ridley wasn't done. It entered phase 2, wings beating faster, the room filling with smaller fireballs. Kale weaved through them, but one grazed him. His lives dropped to 1. The lives, one counter flashed red, a dire warning. Ethan watched, his core vibrating. This was it, the climax he'd designed. The pro leader, cornered, out of options. Ridley reared back, energy gathering for a final, screen-filling beam. Kale's sprite stood its ground, sword raised, but there was nowhere to run. The beam charged, a brilliant purple light that filled the chamber. Kale's last life flashed red, a pixelated heartbeat on the verge of flatlining. And in that moment, Ethan felt it, a surge of energy not from rage, but from sheer, desperate will. Kale wasn't giving up. He was calculating, looking for one last exploit, one last glitch to survive. The beam fired. Everything went white. Kale's heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the pixelated silence of the boss chamber. Ridley's beam, a searing column of crimson energy, filled his vision, painting the blocky walls in hellish light. His last life indicator flashed a desperate red. One misstep, one mistimed dodge, and it would be game over in the most literal sense. But Kale was a pro gamer, trained by the academies to exploit patterns, to see the code beneath the chaos. As Ridley's massive, dragon-like sprite reared back, the beam charging with a low, humming whine that vibrated through the floor, Kale's mind clicked into hyperfocus. He saw it, the tell. A slight dip in Ridley's left wing, a flicker in the sprite's animation that signaled the attack vector. It was a frame-perfect cue, something only someone who'd studied thousands of boss fights would notice. Now, Lyra's voice crackled through their party comms, strained but clear from the control room she'd accessed. Roll under the left arc, Kale. Free-frame window. Kale didn't hesitate. His sprite, a blocky warrior in blue armor, crouched, then launched into a pixel-perfect roll. The beam erupted, scorching the air where he'd been standing, melting the floor tiles into glowing slag. He felt the heat wash over him, but he was already moving, his fingers flying across the imaginary controller of his transformed body. As Ridley recovered, momentarily stunned by the missed attack, Kale saw his opening. He dashed forward, his sword, a simple, 8-bit blade, glinting. With a precise jump, he landed on Ridley's clawed foot, then scaled the boss's leg in a series of quick, programmed movements. Ridley thrashed, but Kale clung on, reaching the weak spot, a glowing, pixelated core on the boss's back, pulsing with malevolent energy. He drove his sword home. The screen flashed white. Ridley let out a final, digitized roar that dissolved into a shower of sparkling pixels. The boss chamber fell silent, save for the soft chiptune fanfare that signaled victory. Kale dropped to the floor, his sprite panting, a visual effect Ethan had programmed to show exhaustion. Above him, loot materialized, a glowing, green energy tank that hovered in the air, pulsing with restorative power. Kale reached out, his sprite's hand touching the item. Instantly, his life counter ticked up from 1 to 5, the red flashing replaced by a steady green. He let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "Lyra, you there?" Alive and annoyed, Lyra's voice came through, lighter now. "That was too close, Kale. Even for us." "Tell me about it," Kale muttered, sheathing his sword. He looked around the chamber. The maze beyond had shifted. Ethan was already redesigning, adapting. Walls had reconfigured, new passages opening where dead ends had been. Regroup point. Now, this dungeon is learning. Ethan watched from his core chamber, a glowing cube suspended in a void of flickering screens and retro game cartridges. The energy from Ridley's defeat surged into him, a cool, calculating stream, different from the hot rage of earlier invaders. Kale's victory hadn't been fueled by frustration. It had been earned through skill, through a deep understanding of game mechanics that mirrored Ethan's own design philosophy. It was unsettling. They're adapting too fast, Ethan thought, his consciousness brushing against the dungeon's code. He pulled up status screens. Kale's party, Lyra, Jax, and Mira, were all converging, their sprites moving through the maze with renewed caution. They'd lost lives, but they'd gained loot, knowledge. They were treating his dungeon like a speed run, optimizing routes, sharing strategies via their comms. Ethan could hear snippets through the dungeon's sensors. Found a warp whistle hidden behind a false wall, Jax reported, his sprite, a burly brawler, emerging into a cleared corridor. Skip straight to floor 3's boss. This place is full of sequence breaks. Exploit them, Kale ordered, his voice calm, analytical. But stay alert. The core is watching. It's adjusting enemy spawn rates. I saw a Goomba respawn in a spot that was clear 2 minutes ago. Ethan flinched. They were right. He was tweaking the AI, ramping up the difficulty in real time. But it felt like playing chess against a grandmaster who'd memorized every opening. These weren't arrogant warriors. They were gamers, trained by the academies to deconstruct virtual worlds. And they were good. A new prompt flashed across Ethan's internal display. Adaptation threshold reached. Final ability unlocked. Game over mode. He focused on it. Game over mode, a one-life, permadeath floor. No respawns, no second chances. The ultimate challenge, designed to break even the most skilled players. It would drain massive energy to activate, but if the pros cleared it, they'd reach his core. They'd win. But if they fail, Ethan mused, his core pulsing with a mix of excitement and dread. He could feel the dungeon expanding, new code writing itself. Floor 5 began to take shape. A brutal, Mega Man-inspired gauntlet of saw blades, disappearing blocks, and precision jumps. He poured his frustration into it, making it cruel, unforgiving. A floor where a single mistake meant erasure. He activated it. The dungeon shuddered, a low rumble that echoed through every corridor. On the lower floors, Lex's guild, a ragtag group of hardcore gamers who'd entered an hour ago, paused, their sprites looking around nervously. "Did you feel that?" Lex asked, his sprite, a nimble rogue, crouching on a platform in floor 2. His livestream chat scrolled beside him, visible only to Ethan. comments flooding in about earthquake glitches and new update. Something's changed, one of his guild mates, a mage named Terra, replied. The music shifted. More intense. They didn't know it yet, but they were heading toward floor 5 too, drawn by the promise of greater challenges and rare loot. Ethan watched their progress, a strange pang in his non-existent chest. Lex, he was different. He enjoyed this, saw the beauty in the pixel-perfect jumps, the nostalgia in the chiptune tracks. His energy fed Ethan not with rage, but with focused determination, a steady, reliable stream. Ethan had started to like him in a weird, detached way. But the pros were the immediate threat. Kale's party regrouped in a safe room Ethan had left open, a small chamber with a save point, a floating, pixelated floppy disk, and a loot chest. They looked battered but determined. Status report, Kale said, leaning against the wall. His sprite's expression was set in a grim line. Lyra sighed. Her sprite, a cleric, activating a healing aura that slowly restored their health bars. I've mapped 60% of floor 4. The maze is dynamic. It changes based on our movements. The core is actively hurting us. Jax cracked his knuckles, a blocky animation. So we break its hurting. Use the glitches. I found a wall clip near the east quadrant. Might skip to the next floor. No, Kale said, shaking his head. Too risky. The core will patch it if we abuse it. We play fair, but smart. We've earned 5 energy tanks total. That gives us cushion. Next objective, find the exit to floor 5. Sensors indicate it's just been activated. Mira, their scout, pulled up a holographic map. I've detected a massive energy spike above us. New floor structure, linear, but packed with high difficulty traps. Permadeath protocols are active. A chill settled over the room. Permadeath. In the real world, that meant their actual lives, their bodies in the Academy's pods, would be terminated if they died here. The system apocalypse had blurred the lines between game and reality, but this was a hard line. The Academies won't like this, Lyra muttered. If we fail, we won't, Kale said, his voice firm. But Ethan saw the flicker of doubt in his sprite's eyes, a slight tremble in the pixels. Good. Fear was fuel too. Meanwhile, in the gleaming spires of the human academies, Commander Vance stared at a holographic feed showing Kale's party's vitals. The room was cold, sterile, filled with other officers in crisp uniforms. They've reached floor 4, Vance said, his voice like gravel. And the dungeon has just unlocked a new floor with permadeath. This glitched core is escalating beyond our projections. A younger officer, Lynn, stepped forward. Sir, we have reports from the field. Gamers, civilians, are flocking to the dungeon. It's become a cultural phenomenon. Streams are getting millions of views. Some are calling it fun. Vance's lip curled. Fun? It's a monstrosity. It strips our warriors of their gear, turns them into pixels. And now it's threatening our best team with permanent deletion. If the pros fail, we launch a full-scale assault. Scramble the artillery mages. We'll reduce that dungeon to rubble. But sir, Lynn protested, the energy signatures, the core is feeding off the attempts. An assault might just make it stronger. Then we'll overwhelm it, Vance snapped. Prepare the contingency plan. If Kale's life signs drop to 0, we move in. No more games. Back in the dungeon, Ethan felt the Academy's intent like a distant pressure, a gathering storm. He didn't have much time. Floor 5 was complete. A nightmare of blue and gray corridors, spinning saw blades that whirred with deadly precision, platforms that vanished after a 3-second timer, and bottomless pits that promised instant death. At the end, a boss chamber awaited, but he kept its contents hidden, even from himself. He wanted it to be a surprise. Kale's party found the entrance, a massive, pixelated door with 5 etched in glowing red. It slid open with a creak of 8-bit sound effects. Beyond, the gauntlet stretched into darkness, the only light coming from blinking hazard strips and the eerie glow of trap mechanisms. Stick to the plan, Kale said, his voice low. Slow and precise. 1 life each. No resets. They stepped through. At the same moment, on floor 3, Lex's guild defeated a Reskin Ganon boss. The loot drop was a rocket boot's power-up, allowing higher jumps. Lex equipped them, his sprite grinning. All right, team. Floor 4, here we come. Let's see if we can beat the pros to the punch. His stream chat exploded with encouragement. Ethan watched, his core humming with conflicted energy. Lex was heading upward too, unknowingly toward the same permadeath floor. Two groups, one fueled by cold skill, the other by passionate grit, both approaching his ultimate challenge. Ethan took a deep, metaphorical breath. He focused his consciousness, pouring his will into floor 5. The saw blade spun faster. The disappearing blocks flickered with shorter timers. The music shifted to a relentless, driving Mega Man track that set the pace for the agony to come. He activated the final protocol. A system-wide announcement flashed across every Invaders HUD in bold, pixelated font. Floor 5. Game over mode active. Permadeath enabled. Survivors will be rewarded. Failure is final. In the gauntlet, Kale's sprite froze for a second, then tightened its grip on its sword. On the lower floor, Lex's grin faded, replaced by a look of intense focus. "Did you see that, chat?" he whispered to his stream. "This just got real." Ethan leaned back in his void, watching the screens. The pros moved forward, testing the first saw blade with cautious jumps. Lex's guild cheered each other on, approaching the entrance from another route. The gauntlet awaited them all, a masterpiece of retro cruelty designed to break the best. "Let's play," Ethan thought, and the dungeon held its breath. The air in floor 5 hummed with a low, digital static that prickled the skin. Kale stood at the entrance, his pixelated sprite form tense as he surveyed the nightmare before him. The corridor stretched into darkness, lit only by pulsing cyan grid lines on the walls, a stark, minimalist aesthetic that screamed Mega Man. But this was no nostalgic homage. Saw blades rotated with mechanical precision along the ceiling, their serrated edges glinting with lethal intent. Disappearing blocks formed a precarious path over a bottomless void, flickering in and out of existence with a rhythm that felt deliberately cruel. Game over mode activated. A robotic voice echoed through the chamber, devoid of emotion. One life remaining. Permadeath rules in effect. Lyra, the team's mage, swallowed hard. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that settled in her gut. "Kale, this is different. The energy here, it's like the dungeon is watching us more closely." Jax, the tank, hefted his shield, a blocky, 8-bit rectangle that seemed pitifully small against the onslaught ahead. "We've beaten worse. Stick to the plan, watch the patterns, move as one." But Mira, the rogue, was already shaking her head. Her fingers twitched, a nervous habit from years of competitive gaming. "No, Jax. Look at the timing. Those blades are synced to the block's disappearance. It's not just about reflexes. It's about memorizing a sequence we've never seen before." Ethan's designed this to be unforgiving. Kale nodded, his mind racing. Back in the academies, they'd trained for glitch exploitation and speed runs, but this felt personal. The dungeon core wasn't just throwing obstacles, it was testing their very souls. He could almost feel Ethan's presence in the cold, calculated layout, a sentient intelligence reveling in their fear. "We go in pairs," Kale decided, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "Lyra and Mira, you take point. Jax and I will cover the rear. Watch for tells, any change in the hum, any flicker in the lights. Ethan's leaving clues. We just have to be smart enough to see them." As they stepped onto the first disappearing block, it held firm for 3 seconds before vanishing. Lyra leaped to the next, her sprite form a blur of motion, but the saw blade above descended faster than anticipated. She twisted midair, a pixel-perfect dodge that scraped her shoulder, reducing her health bar by a sliver. "Damn it. The timing's randomized," she gasped, landing on a stable platform. Mira followed, her movements fluid as she weaved between two blades. "Not randomized, adaptive. It's learning from our jumps." She pointed to a control panel on the wall, its screen flashing with binary code. "Ethan's adjusting in real time. We need to break the pattern." Jax wasn't so lucky. As he lumbered forward, his heavier sprite lagged by a fraction of a second. A disappearing block gave way beneath his feet. He plummeted into the void with a choked cry, his form dissolving into a burst of pixels before the game over message flashed briefly. No respawn. No second chance. Just silence. Kale's breath hitched. Jax was gone, permanently. The reality of permadeath slammed into him like a physical blow. Back in the training sims, failure meant a reset, a lesson learned. Here, it meant oblivion. He clenched his fists, the energy from Jax's demise washing over him in a wave of cold fury. Keep moving, he barked, forcing down the grief. Don't look back. Lyra's eyes were wide with shock, but she nodded, her determination hardening. They pressed on, navigating a gauntlet of spike traps that shot from the walls with blinding speed. Mira mapped their patterns, calling out warnings in a rapid-fire stream. Left spike in 2 now. Jump high on the next block. It'll hold for 5 seconds. Her expertise was the only thing keeping them alive, but even she was sweating, her focus stretched thin. Halfway through the floor, they reached a chamber filled with conveyor belts moving in opposing directions. Saw blades crisscrossed the space in a dizzying array. Lyra paused, her mage instincts flaring. There's a pattern here, a musical rhythm. Listen. The hum of the machinery had a subtle beat, like an 8-bit soundtrack from hell. She timed her jumps to the downbeats, landing safely on a central platform. Mira followed, mimicking her timing. But Kale hesitated, his mind clouded by Jax's loss. He missed a beat, stumbling as a blade grazed his leg. His health bar dropped to 50%. Kale, focus! Lyra shouted, her voice edged with panic. He shook his head, forcing himself back into the zone. They were a team of 4 reduced to 3, and every mistake cost dearly. As they cleared the conveyor belts, a new threat emerged, turrets mounted on the walls, firing pixelated bullets in spread patterns. Lyra cast a barrier spell, a shimmering, blocky shield that absorbed the shots, but it drained her mana rapidly. I can't hold this long, she grunted. Mira darted forward, using her agility to disable one turret with a well-placed strike to its weak point, a glowing red pixel. But another turret swiveled, targeting her. Kale leaped, shoving her out of the way as a bullet tore through his sprite. His health plummeted to 10%, the red warning flash blinding. No, Mira cried, but it was too late. Kale collapsed, his form flickering before dissolving into nothingness. 2 down. Lyra and Mira stood alone, breathing heavily in the sudden quiet. The dungeon seemed to pulse with satisfaction, the static hum growing louder. He's feeding off this, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling. Our fear, our failures, it's making him stronger. Mira nodded, her face pale. We can't stop now. For Kale, for Jax. They pushed forward, their movements more cautious, more desperate. The final stretch was a narrow bridge over a lake of pixelated lava, with disappearing blocks that vanished after 1 second of contact. Lyra went first, her jumps precise but strained. She made it across, turning to watch Mira. But Myra's luck ran out. As she leaped for the last block, it disappeared a millisecond early. Her sprite hung in the air for a heart-stopping moment before falling into the lava with a sizzle. Another burst of pixels, another silent farewell. Lyra was alone. She sank to her knees, the weight of loss crushing her. 3 teammates gone, just like that. The dungeon's energy swirled around her, thick with malevolent glee. She could almost hear Ethan's voice in the static. Game over. But she wasn't dead yet. Clenching her fists, she stood up. I'm not done, she muttered to herself, her eyes fixed on the door at the end of the bridge. It slid open, revealing a vast arena beyond. Lex's guild entered floor 5 minutes later, unaware of the carnage that had preceded them. The group, Lex, Mara the healer, Finn the warrior, and Taro the scout, paused at the entrance, taking in the same ominous scene. Whoa, Finn breathed, his blocky sprite scratching its head. This looks intense. Lex felt a thrill of excitement mixed with dread. His stream was live, thousands of viewers watching as he faced permadeath for the first time. All right, team, he said, his voice calm through the stream's mic, we've trained for this. Stick to the roles. Finn tanks, Mara heals, Taro scouts ahead. I'll call the shots. Remember, 1 life. No respawns. They moved as a unit, their teamwork honed from hours of practice. Taro mapped the disappearing blocks patterns, calling out safe paths. Finn used his shield to block saw blades, though each impact chipped away at his health. Mara kept everyone topped up with careful healing spells, her mana management flawless. Lex led with a gamer's intuition, his movements almost dance-like as he dodged traps. Look at that control panel, Lex pointed out as they passed the same binary screen Mira had noted. Ethan's tweaking things in real time. We need to stay unpredictable. He deliberately varied their jump timings, throwing off the adaptive AI. It worked. The saw blades hesitated, their patterns stuttering. But the dungeon fought back. As they reached the conveyor belts, the turrets activated, firing faster than before. Finn took a bullet meant for Mara, his health dropping to 30%. Mara, heal, Lex ordered, but she was already casting, her sprite glowing with restorative energy. They cleared the belts, but the bridge ahead was even deadlier than before. The disappearing blocks now vanished after half a second. Taro scouted ahead, his agility saving him as he barely made it across. "It's impossible," he shouted back. "The timing's too tight." Lex's mind raced. He remembered a trick from old Mega Man games. Sometimes, the solution wasn't to follow the path, but to break it. "Finn, use your shield as a platform." "Mara, boost him with a speed spell." They improvised, Finn launching his shield onto the lava, where it floated for a few seconds. Lex jumped onto it, then to the next block, creating a makeshift path. It was risky, but it worked. They all made it across, breathless but alive. The arena door loomed ahead. "Ready?" Lex asked, his heart pounding. They nodded, stepping inside. Ethan watched from his core, a swirling nexus of light and code deep within the dungeon. The energy from the pro's deaths was intoxicating, a raw, potent rage that fueled his growth. He felt his consciousness expand, new abilities unlocking, the power to manipulate time on a microscale, to generate illusions. But as Lex's guild progressed, their energy was different, focused, determined, almost joyful. It was a cleaner fuel, less volatile but steady. He observed Lyra entering the arena alone, her sprite battered but unbroken. Then Lex's group arrived, their formation tight. Two parties, reduced to remnants, converging on his masterpiece. A smile, if a dungeon core could smile, tugged at his essence. This was the ultimate test. The arena was a colossal chamber, its walls lined with flickering screens showing glitched game footage. At its center, a platform rose, and on it materialized the final boss. It was a glitched, pixelated version of Ethan's own console form, a cube with jagged edges, its surface crawling with corrupted code. Two eyes glowed with malevolent red light, scanning the invaders. Tentacles of pure data writhed around it, sparking with electricity. Lyra stared, her breath catching. "What is that?" she whispered. Lex's stream blew up with comments. "I asked at the dungeon core. This is insane." He kept his cool, analyzing. "It's a manifestation of Ethan himself. Weak points are likely the eyes or those data streams." The boss's eyes locked onto them. A voice, distorted and layered with static, echoed through the arena. "Welcome to the endgame. Your lives are forfeit. Your skills, insufficient." Lyra didn't wait. She unleashed a barrage of magic missiles, but they dissipated against a shimmering barrier. The boss retaliated, firing a spread of pixel bullets that filled the screen. Lex's team scattered, Finn tanking hits while Mara healed. Lyra joined their efforts, her spells blending with theirs in an unspoken alliance. Ethan, as the boss, reveled in the challenge. He threw everything he had, screen-filling bullet patterns that required pixel-perfect dodges, tentacle sweeps that forced jumps, and data storms that scrambled their controls. Lyra fell first, a tentacle catching her off guard. She dissolved with a cry, her energy flooding Ethan's core. Finn was next, overwhelmed by the barrage. Mara tried to save him, but a bullet pierced her sprite. Taro lasted longer, using his agility to evade, but a data storm trapped him, and he vanished. Only Lex remained, his health at 15%, his focus absolute. He danced through the attacks, his movements a testament to years of gaming. He found a rhythm, dodging, striking at the eyes whenever an opening appeared. The boss's health bar dropped slowly, 90%, 80%, 50%. Ethan felt a flicker of doubt. This invader wasn't just surviving. He was mastering the fight. With a final, desperate move, Lex activated a hidden power-up he'd saved. A star from earlier floors, granting brief invincibility. He charged, striking both eyes in rapid succession. The boss shuddered, its form glitching violently. The health bar hit 1%, but Lex's invincibility wore off. He stood panting, out of lives, one hit away from permadeath. The boss reared up for a final, crushing attack. Ethan hesitated. In that moment, he saw not just an invader, but a kindred spirit, a gamer who loved the challenge as much as he did. The malevolent code in his eyes wavered, replaced by a flicker of something else, recognition. The chapter ends with the boss's attack poised to strike, Lex bracing for the end, and Ethan's core vibrating with a decision that could change everything. The arena pulsed with a sickly green glow, the air thick with the hum of corrupted code. Before Lex and Lyra stood the glitched manifestation of Ethan's dungeon core, a monstrous, pixelated console that towered 3 stories high. Its screen flickered with static, displaying fragmented images of classic game over screens, while its sides bristled with jagged, 8-bit spikes that crackled with energy. 2 glowing red eyes, like corrupted LEDs, fixed on the invaders with cold, calculating malice. Lex wiped sweat from his brow, his pixelated sprite form trembling slightly. He had no lives left. The game over counter above his head displayed a stark 0, and his health bar was a thin sliver of red. Beside him, Lyra, the sole surviving pro gamer, stood in a defensive crouch. Her sprite was sleek and angular, a warrior model with a cracked shield and a chipped sword. She too had 0 lives, her expression a mask of grim determination. "We're dead if we take one more hit," Lyra muttered, her voice tight. "But that thing's at 1%. One good strike." "It won't be that easy," Lex replied, his eyes scanning the boss. "Look at its patterns. The bullets earlier, they followed classic shmup spreads. But now it's charging something new." As if on cue, the boss's screen flashed. A distorted voice, like a corrupted audio file, echoed through the arena. "Final phase initiated. Player input required." The ground beneath them shifted, transforming into a grid of glowing tiles, some safe, some deadly. Lex recognized it immediately, a rhythm-based memory game from an old music title, but scaled to lethal proportions. "Step only on the blue tiles," Lex shouted, already moving. "They'll flash in sequence. Memorize it." The tiles lit up in a rapid pattern. Blue, blue, red, blue, red, red. Lyra hesitated for a split second, her training in exploit theory clashing with the old-school logic. "This is absurd. There's no mana pool to analyze. Just follow the damn pattern." Lex leaped onto the first blue tile as it flashed. Lyra gritted her teeth and followed, her movements precise but stiff. The boss's eyes tracked them, and from its sides, pixelated bullets erupted in a screen-filling spread, homing missiles that weaved between the safe tiles. Lex danced through the barrage, his years of speedrunning manifesting in pixel-perfect dodges. He felt a strange exhilaration mixed with terror. This wasn't just a fight. It was a performance, streamed live to millions through his still-active broadcast. He could almost hear the chat scrolling, comments cheering, others predicting their doom. The energy from that attention fed into Ethan's core, but Lex's focus was pure, untainted by rage. It was the thrill of the challenge. Lyra wasn't faring as well. A bullet grazed her sprite, and she stumbled, her foot landing on a red tile. It flashed crimson, and a spike shot up, impaling her pixelated leg. She cried out, her health bar dropping to a sliver. "I can't. The timing is too precise." "Switch to my rhythm," Lex called, his voice calm despite the chaos. "Watch my movements. Mirror me." He began to hum a tune from an old game, using it as a metronome. Lyra, forced to adapt, synced her steps to his. Together, they navigated the tile grid, the bullets whizzing past. The boss's health remained at 1%, but its attacks intensified. The screen displayed a countdown. 10, 9, 8. It's a DPS race. Lyra realized. We have to damage it before time runs out. But how? Their weapons were basic. Lex had a simple sword from a loot drop, Lyra her chipped blade. The boss's weak points were its eyes, but they were protected by a rotating shield of glitched pixels. Lex's mind raced. He remembered a secret from an ancient platformer. Sometimes, the environment was the key. "See those spikes on its sides?" he pointed. "If we can lure its attack to hit them, it might cause a chain reaction." Lyra nodded, understanding. Distracted. "I'll position myself." As the countdown hit 5, Lex charged forward, not at the boss, but toward a cluster of safe tiles near its left flank. He taunted, waving his sword. "Come on, you overgrown calculator. Show me what you've got." The boss obliged. Its eyes glowed brighter, and it fired a concentrated beam of pixelated energy straight at Lex. At the last second, he rolled aside, and the beam struck the spikes on the boss's side. The impact caused a feedback loop. The spikes shattered in a burst of pixels, and the boss shuddered, its health bar flickering. Now, Lyra leaped, using the distraction to climb onto a crumbling spike. She vaulted high, her sword aimed at the left eye. But the shield rotated faster, deflecting her strike. She fell back, landing hard on a blue tile that was fading to red. Lex didn't hesitate. He threw his sword, a desperate move he'd seen in a retro RPG. It spun through the air, striking the right eye just as the shield shifted. A crack appeared in the pixelated surface, and the boss roared, a sound like grinding gears. Its health didn't drop, but the shield faltered. It's vulnerable. Lyra scrambled up, but the countdown hit 0. The tiles vanished, and the arena returned to solid ground. The boss entered its final attack. Screen-clear bullet hell flashed on its screen. Thousands of tiny, glowing bullets filled the space, moving in intricate, overlapping patterns. There was no safe spot, only gaps that appeared for fractions of a second. Lex's breath caught. This was it, the ultimate test of memorization and reflex. He closed his eyes for a moment, calling on every boss fight he'd ever mastered. When he opened them, his movements became fluid, almost instinctual. He weaved through the bullets, his sprite a blur of motion. Lyra tried to follow, but a bullet clipped her shoulder. She gasped, her health bar emptying. She was one hit from permadeath, her sprite flickering. Lex, I can't. Stay behind me. Lex positioned himself in front of her, using his body as a shield. He parried bullets with his bare hands, each deflection costing him a sliver of health. The strain was immense. Ethan, watching from his core consciousness, felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Lyra's frustration fed him power, but Lex's determination, it was different. It was clean, almost respectful energy. The bullet hell subsided, leaving the arena scorched and smoking. Both invaders were on their knees, their health bars invisible now. Any touch would end them. The boss loomed, its eyes dimming. It had thrown everything, and they'd survived. But it still had 1% health. A new prompt appeared, final weak point exposed. One strike remains. A small, glowing core, a miniature version of Ethan's true form, emerged from the boss's chest, pulsing with a soft blue light. It was unprotected, hovering invitingly. Lyra struggled to her feet. That's it. One hit. She raised her sword, but her arm trembled. I don't have the strength. Lex looked at her, then at the core. He thought of his stream, of the gamers watching, of the community that had formed around this dungeon. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something greater, a recognition of skill, of passion. He met Lyra's eyes. Together. She nodded, understanding. They moved as one. Lyra providing a boost with her last ounce of energy, Lex leaping from her shoulders. His hand closed around the hilt of his discarded sword, and he plunged it toward the glowing core. But at the last moment, he stopped. The tip hovered a pixel away from the core. Ethan, through the boss, felt it, a hesitation that defied all game logic. Why didn't he strike? Lex looked up, not at the boss, but at the arena's ceiling, as if he could see Ethan's true form. I know you're in there, he said, his voice steady. This isn't just a glitch. You're making us play by your rules, but you're playing too. And you're hesitating. Ethan's consciousness reeled. Lex was right. He could end them now, claim victory, and level up beyond anything. But the energy from Lex, it wasn't rage, it was admiration. It was the joy of the game. And in that moment, Ethan remembered his own past life, the countless hours spent mastering these same challenges. He wasn't just a dungeon core, he was a gamer, too. The boss froze, its attack ceasing. The arena fell silent, save for the hum of code. Lyra stared, confused. What's happening? Lex lowered his sword. He's choosing. Ethan made his decision. The boss's form began to dissolve, pixels floating away like dust. The core retracted, and the arena shifted, transforming into a neutral space. A simple platform with a save point icon glowing softly. A message appeared in the air, in crisp 8-bit font. Victory achieved. But at what cost? Lex and Lyra stood unharmed, their lives still at 0, but no longer under threat. The broadcast had captured it all. The near win, the hesitation, the mysterious reprieve. Chat was exploding, theories flying. Lyra sank to the ground, exhausted. Why did you stop? Lex smiled faintly. Because sometimes, the best games aren't about winning. They're about the play. He looked around, addressing the empty air. Show yourself. Let's talk. Ethan, from his core, felt a strange pull. He had won. In a way, he'd proven his dungeon's power. But he'd also lost something. The anonymity of being a mere monster. Lex had seen through the pixels to the sentience beneath. And as the chapter closed, Ethan hovered on the edge of a new realization. Perhaps his 8-bit hell wasn't just for grinding invaders. Perhaps it could be something more, if he dared to reach out. The screen faded to black, but not before a final prompt flashed. New Game Plus unlocked? The pixelated dust settled in the boss chamber. The remnants of Ethan's glitched console form drifting like digital snowflakes through the air. Lex stood frozen, his character sprites sword arm trembling at the ready position. Beside him, Lyra, the pro-gamer leader whose real name he'd learned was Arya during their desperate alliance, had her staff lowered, its magical glow flickering uncertainly. Above their heads, the lives counter blinked a desperate, final warning, 0/3. They should have been dead. By every rule of the dungeon, by every law of the system apocalypse, that final screen-filling bullet pattern should have erased them in a burst of 8-bit particles. Yet here they stood, breathing hard in their transformed bodies, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the dungeon's ambient music, a chiptune melody that had shifted from frantic battle themes to something contemplative, almost melancholic. What just happened? Arya's voice came through the party chat, stripped of its usual calculated confidence. Her sprite turned to face Lex's, the blocky pixels somehow conveying bewilderment. The boss had us. One more hit. Why didn't it? Before she could finish, the chamber began to change. The walls, which had been a chaotic mosaic of glitching colors and corrupted sprites, smoothed into a clean, dark blue grid. The floor tiles rearranged themselves into a perfect checkerboard pattern of black and white. At the center of the room, where the massive console boss had disintegrated, a single point of light began to pulse, gentle, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Lex lowered his sword completely, the Master Sword loot he'd earned on floor 3 dimming to a soft blue glow. His streaming interface in the corner of his vision showed viewer counts he couldn't even process. Millions, all watching this moment. Chat scrolling too fast to read. He'd been streaming this run since floor 1, turning what started as a dare into a cultural phenomenon. Now, as he stared at that pulsing light, he remembered the hesitation he'd felt in that final moment. Not fear of death. He'd faced permadeath before in hardcore modes, but something else. A sense that the entity behind those glowing console eyes wasn't just code. It spared us, Lex said quietly, his voice carrying through his stream. The dungeon core. It had the winning move and didn't take it. Arya's sprite took a cautious step forward. That's impossible. Dungeon cores are mindless constructs. They follow program behaviors. They don't choose. This one does, Lex replied, his gamer instincts humming. He'd felt it during the fight. The patterns weren't just random or scripted. They adapted. They responded. When he'd pulled off that frame-perfect dodge against the bullet hell attack, the boss had paused for exactly 3 frames. A hesitation no AI should have shown. I think it's watching us right now. As if in response, the pulsing light intensified. From it emerged not a monster, not a boss, but a simple, floating cube. It was smaller than the boss form had been, about the size of a human head, with a matte gray finish and what looked like cartridge slots along one side. On its front face, a single red LED glowed softly. It hovered there, silent, waiting. Then text appeared in the air before them, rendered in perfect 8-bit font. Player 1, Lex. Player 2, Arya. Connection established. Downloading dialogue package. Complete. A voice emerged from the cube, not through the party chat, but directly into their minds. It was genderless, synthesized yet strangely warm, with the faintest hint of static behind it, like an old cassette tape. I am Ethan, the voice said. Or I was, before the system turned me into this. Lex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dungeon's temperature. He'd heard rumors, of course, whispers among the gamer communities about sentient dungeons, about cores that remembered being human. But the academies had dismissed them as glitches, anomalies to be purged. He glanced at Arya, saw her sprite stiffen. You're human? Arya asked, her professional detachment cracking. Was, Ethan corrected. Died in the apocalypse. Woke up like this. The system gave me a choice. Design dungeons or be dismantled for parts. So I designed. A pause. The LED on the cube blinked. I designed what I knew. What I loved. Lex understood immediately. The Contra corridors. The Mario platforming. The Zelda puzzles. The Metroid mazes. This wasn't random cruelty. It was someone's passion project. You made it hard on purpose. Old school hard. Ethan's voice held what might have been pride. No hand-holding. No tutorials. Just skill and memory. Like the games I grew up with. People died, Arya said sharply. My team. Your team entered my home expecting to smash it to bits. Ethan interrupted, the static in his voice thickening slightly. They came with spells and swords, thinking they'd clear me in an afternoon. I gave them a challenge worthy of their arrogance. And yes, they died. But they respawned outside, didn't they? With all their gear restored. Arya fell silent. It was true. The dungeon's permadeath only applied on the final floor. Every other death resulted in respawn at the entrance, slightly weakened but alive. The academies had assumed it was a bug in the system's programming. Now she wondered. You could have killed us just now, Lex said, taking a step toward the cube. Game over mode, one life, permanent death. Why didn't you? For a long moment, Ethan didn't respond. The cube rotated slowly, its LED pulsing in time with the ambient music. When the voice came again, it was quieter. Because you didn't treat it like a slaughter, Ethan said. You treated it like a game. A challenge to be mastered. You streamed it, shared strategies, celebrated small victories. When you found the warp whistle on floor 1, you didn't just use it. You explained to your viewers why it was a reference to World 1 to 2. You appreciated it. Another pause. And in that final moment, you hesitated. You looked at me and saw something more than code. Lex remembered the feeling. That split-second decision as his sword hovered over the boss's last pixel of health. He'd seen the console's eyes, glowing with what he now realized was intelligence, and something in him had rebelled against striking down what might be the last remnant of pre-apocalypse culture. What happens now? Arya asked, her voice more measured now. The pro-gamer in her was analyzing, calculating. We're at 0 lives. By your rules, we should be ejected. The cube floated closer. New text appeared. Offering, beta tester protocol. Accept? Y/N. You have a choice, Ethan said. Leave, and I'll teleport you to the entrance. Your stream ends. The academies declare victory or defeat based on whatever narrative they prefer. Or, the LED brightened. Stay? Help me. Help you what? Lex asked. Design, Ethan said simply. You've seen my levels. You've played them. You understand the logic behind them. I can create the frameworks, but you know what challenges real gamers want. What feels fair yet punishing. What secrets would delight someone who grew up with strategy guides and late-night gaming sessions. The cube projected images into the air, concept art for new floors. A Castlevania-inspired Gothic castle with whip mechanics. A punch-out. Boxing ring with telegraph tells. A Kirby-style level where players could absorb enemy abilities. They were rough, pixelated sketches, but the potential was obvious. You want us to be dungeon consultants? Arya sounded incredulous. Beta testers, Ethan corrected. Play the new levels before they go live. Find the broken strategies. Suggest improvements. In return, you get early access, exclusive loot tables, and... The cube rotated to face Lex directly. A partnership. Your stream becomes the official channel for dungeon reveals. You build the community. Lex's mind raced. This was unprecedented. Dungeon cores didn't negotiate. They didn't offer partnerships. They were obstacles to be overcome, resources to be harvested. Yet here was one offering collaboration. And the gamer in him, the part that had spent countless hours in modding communities, sharing custom levels and challenge runs, felt a thrill he hadn't experienced since before the apocalypse. What about the academies? Arya asked. They sent me here to shut you down. If I walk out and tell them you're sentient and offering jobs. Show them this, Ethan said. The cube projected another image, a live feed of the dungeon entrance. Crowds had gathered, not just academy soldiers, but civilians, gamers, merchants. They were watching massive screens that had somehow appeared outside, displaying Lex's stream. The chat was visible, scrolling with messages of support, excitement, demands for merchandise. They're not afraid anymore. They're excited. Arya watched the feed. She saw her own commanders in the crowd, their faces not angry, but thoughtful. One was pointing at the screen, discussing something with a civilian in gamer gear. The narrative had shifted while they were fighting. The glitched dungeon had become the retro challenge. The monster had become a maestro. If I accept, Arya said slowly, what happens to my team? The ones who didn't make it. They're alive, Ethan said, recovering at the entrance. And if they want to try again, I'll design a co-op floor specifically for squad tactics. Something that rewards teamwork over individual skill. Lex made his decision. He reached out, not with his sword, but with his sprite's hand, hovering it near the cube. I'm in, he said, but on one condition. The LED blinked. Name it. No more permadeath floors, Lex said. Hard is fine. Brutal is great. But the moment you make it truly impossible to recover from, you lose what makes this special. It becomes cruelty, not challenge. Ethan was silent for so long Lex wondered if he'd offended the core. Then the cube pulsed warmly. Agreed. The game over mode was a panic response. The pros were too good. I got scared. The admission was startling in its honesty. From now on, all floors have respawns. But the challenges will be real. Arya looked from the cube to Lex to the projected images of the waiting crowds. Her entire career had been built on exploiting systems, beating dungeons efficiently, serving the Academy's agenda. But this was something new. A dungeon that wanted to be played, not conquered. A core that remembered being human. A challenge that celebrated skill rather than punishing weakness. She let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. I'll need to consult with my commanders. But she met Lex's sprite's eyes, saw the excitement there. I think we can work with this. Beta tester protocol accepted. Welcome, player 1 and 2. Downloading design interface. New screens appeared before them. Not combat HUDs, but level editors. Tile palettes. Enemy spawners. Loot tables. They were intuitive, beautifully designed, with drag-and-drop functionality and tooltips written in that same 8-bit font. Start small, Ethan suggested. A bonus room. Something hidden in floor 2 that only players who find a certain sequence of jumps can access. Put a rare power up there. See how it feels. Lex found himself smiling. A real smile, not the performative one he used for streaming. He selected a tile set of floating platforms and bottomless pits, began arranging them in a pattern that would require a running start and a perfectly timed double jump. Arya, beside him, was adjusting enemy AI, setting patrolling Goombas to change direction based on player position. Outside, the crowds cheered as the stream showed the collaboration. The Academy's commanders, after a brief, intense discussion, made an announcement. The dungeon was to be classified not as a threat, but as a training and entertainment facility. Admission would be regulated, but encouraged. A new guild, the Retro Raiders, was already forming, with Lex and Arya as its de facto leaders. In the chamber, Ethan felt his core expanding, not just in power, though the energy from millions of viewers' excitement was flooding him, leveling him up to heights he hadn't imagined, but in purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was creating, building, sharing something he loved with people who appreciated it. The cube floated to the highest point in the chamber, its LED glowing steadily now, no longer pulsing with uncertainty. Below, Lex and Arya were deep in discussion about whether a particular platform was Nintendo hard or just cheap. Hey, Ethan, Lex called up. What about a floor based on rhythm games? Timing-based obstacles set to chiptune tracks. Ethan considered. He accessed his memory banks, the fragments of his human life that remained. Late nights with a Guitar Hero controller, failing solos until his fingers ached. I like it, he said, but we make the fail state hilarious. Instead of dying, players get transformed into a dancing sprite that can't stop until the song ends. Arya actually laughed, a short, surprised sound. That's actually good game design. They worked for hours, the dungeon around them shifting to accommodate their creations. New corridors branched off existing floors. Secret warp pipes led to experimental chambers. Ethan felt more alive, more human, than he had since his transformation. As the first beta testers from the newly formed Retro Raiders Guild began to trickle into the updated dungeon, their excitement a tangible energy in the air, Ethan allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The 8-bit hell he'd built to survive had become something else entirely. A community, a challenge, a legacy. And somewhere, in the depths of his code, the ghost of a gamer who died in a car crash smiled, because his games were being played again. The chapter ends with Lex and Ethan designing the first collaborative level, a co-op puzzle floor that requires 2 players to stand on opposite switches while dodging falling blocks. Their laughter echoing through the digital halls as they playtest it together, the dungeon's future unfolding 1 pixel at a time.